Good morning, everyone. Please forgive our tardiness this morning. We wanted to get a couple housekeeping things in order this morning. Madam Clerk, please call the roll. Here.
Here.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, as a question, do I need to read the ordinance again? We just kind of adjourned the meeting, recessed the meeting last week. So you want me to read it again? Okay. You know, she's in charge. I got to make sure I do the right thing. All right. All right. Again, good morning, everyone. Ordinance number 1039-2023 by council members Hairston and Griffin by departmental request, an emergency ordinance to amend various sections of the codified ordinances of Cleveland, Ohio, 1976, as amended by various ordinances relating to the Department of Building and Housing generally, to renumber existing sections 3143.04 to 3143.98, to change the name of Chapter 3143, and to enact new sections 3104.01 to 3104.09, 3104.99, 3106.01 to 3106.10, 3106.99, 3143.04, and 3143.05, relating to civil enforcement, vacant property registration, and parking garage inspections. All right. We have a few guests who've signed in for offer public comment this morning. We do have guests. Our fantastic, incomparable Judge W. Monet Scott from the Cleveland Housing Court is with us today. We have the CEO and representatives from the ACAR, Akron Cleveland Realtors Association. All right. I want to mess that up. Then obviously we have our esteemed Building and Housing Department with us as well. Former Council President Jay Westbrook is with us from the Moreland Group, Mr. Frank Ford, and so many others who have joined us today. And please forgive me if I forgot anyone. All right, we're going to first start off and have our judge come up. We're going to welcome our judge to come up to the table. She would like to make a few comments. And we will ask if there's Building and Housing would like to come up as well.
And get your team behind you.
Right. Where would you like the judge?
She can sit here. You can sit there.
Okay. Judge is sitting here, so that's still you sit here.
Sit here.
I'm going to warn the many esteemed speakers who I know are coming to visit and the team in advance. I can only stay for a little bit because I have a drive through my ward with Tom McNair, which, of course, as you know, you wouldn't want to miss. So I do apologize for that. I'll have to leave pretty early.
Thank you for that announcement, Councilwoman. All right.
Good morning.
All right. Again, good morning. Thank you, Judge. I know you reached out. There was different comments or questions that were asked during the last committee meeting regarding the court, and I know that your staff was watching the presentation, and you reached out and wanted to make sure that you come over and just have a brief dialogue with the body today. Judge?
Okay. Good morning, council members and chairman of the committee. So I didn't have the luxury to watch all 5 hours of the meeting. I did not. I just remember getting a lot of text messages asking me if I was watching, if I was attending, from several members of the public, also some members of the bench and things like that reside in Cleveland. So I was having hearings and doing a multitude of things, and so I did have the luxury to watch a couple of hours. And then I went back to watch from the beginning, but still did not make it all the way to the end. So I commend everybody that attended that meeting, because that was a marathon. I have to start off by apologizing. I just got my Invisalign in, so if I feel like I have a speech impediment, but everybody else doesn't hear it, so I'm going to struggle just a little bit. I wanted to speak on behalf of the court, because the executive branch is the one that created the new legislation, and City Council is reviewing it, but the court is where it goes into action. So I think it is necessary to see what is going on with the laws that we currently have that's in action. So I wanted to give you guys some kind of ideas about that. And this is more like data. I remember hearing, I believe it was Inspector Birkin, who notified City Council that there were 7 inspectors. I think it was during a public comment. He was at the table. And that's when it was brought to council's attention, and you did ask Director Martin O'Toole about the 7 inspectors. I believe I heard Director Martin O'Toole say they have 100 inspectors, but I think it's what you didn't hear. And I think Inspector Birkin's concern was capacity. And I see what comes across my bench. Now, just for the purpose of edifying those that are tuning in, Housing Court does not go out and create these cases. Housing Court cannot go out and get involved. We must remain impartial at all times. That being said, it is the duty of the code enforcement prosecutors to enforce the building and housing codes, zoning codes, health codes, and fire codes throughout the city of Cleveland. But I think everyone needs to know what does that look like. And no fault to the directors of law department and building and housing, but it's the boots on the ground that experience what it looks like. And it's also the court that sees the impact of things not being done efficiently. That being said, just to give you some kind of idea, and I'm not sure if they found, did you find that list? I just wanted to let you know that for the year 2023, there were...
And just, I don't mean to cut you off. We'll make sure the committee gets this information. We're just trying to get it over and get it uploaded at a short period of time. And so we'll make sure everyone gets the information. Thank
Right,
you.
and actually, this is our budget information, so we're still editing. It's just why I didn't bring copies of things like that. But for 2023, there were 1,368 cases that were filed in housing court. That's a drastic drop in criminal complaints filed through the court. Not sure what's the cause of that, but the year prior, and they're looking for the data, I think we were at about 2,000, about 2,500 cases, 2,300 cases, criminal cases that was filed. But out of those cases that were filed, a portion of them were nollied by the prosecutor. So you had 66 cases that were nollied by the prosecutor. And
Yes.
yes, to the chairman, to Councilman Jones, 66 cases were nollied. We're still trying to go through the data because our computer system doesn't pull out things specifically, plus we're still building our case management system. So in asking for data, we are showing the system how to pull the exact data. 66 of those cases were filed by the prosecutor. A majority of them were filed because one inspector resigned and one inspector retired. And so they will, and when I say they, the code enforcement prosecutors, they're different than the general division prosecutors, but they will file motions to dismiss due to that. So that shows that there's no contingency plan when you hear 7 inspectors are currently going through and issuing these complaints to be signed off by the prosecutor. What happens when, let's say, Inspector Arnold, who I know does a lot of residential rentals inspections, if he resigns or he retires, or Mr. Maxwell, who does a lot of inspections of residential units, if they resign, what is the contingency plan of that? And then to pull them away, let me just start off by saying I'm not against any of the codes, changes in the codes. A lot of them needed to be updated and modernized. Some of them cause concerns, especially the civil sanctions. I did hear Director Martin say they can get people into court faster. I have to disagree because there is a struggle for the city code enforcement prosecutors to serve the LLCs, the organizations. And it's not because, I think it's a myth out there that a lot of them don't register with the Secretary of State. A lot of them actually do. It was who were the summons going to? Was it going to their statutory agent that gets them the mail? Or was it going to a tax mailing address, which a lot of them was going to the tax mailing address, in which I had to inform the code enforcement prosecutors to not continue to pass for service, but to the same address, which is going to a building that's possibly vacant. So I want to make it clear that when these laws are enacted, and if you can correct me, Chairman, this is an emergency legislation that's being done?
Yeah, a lot of what we do is emergency ordinances.
Okay, and that means it immediately goes into effect?
Well, there's still a process. It has to go through the 3 readings. It's, signed by the mayor. It takes effect if it's receives a majority vote.
Okay. That impacts the court because anything that goes through, we have to review and set up a process. If it's a new ordinance, we have to go through and add that into our case management system so that if a complaint is filed, how does that look? And when the court is kind of left out of the loop, not that we should be necessarily brought into the loop, but we should be given the heads up. Even the new lead safe certification had to be redone. They're not doing the minor misdemeanors. Citations with waivers had to be redone through the case management system. But for my former magistrate, who was a magistrate for, I think, about 20 years, it's been a while, but for him going to be the chief of code enforcement, we just would have been slammed with filings and the clerk not knowing what to do with those new filings. So it's imperative that the conversation be part of how does this look in action. The community wants one thing, the chiefs of the departments wants one thing, and then I believe the mayor would want one thing, and then council, which I know one of your biggest complaints from your constituents is always housing. Last year, I believe we issued so many search warrants. And give me a second, I'm looking for that data. We issued, and it was over 100. But then the question is how many of those were returned, meaning how many of those properties got inspected by the inspectors. In 2023, we issued 145 search warrants. Only 54 were returned. That means that they were actually returned by the inspectors to the magistrates who signed off on the return, and then they were scanned and sent to the clerk's office. 2022, 126 search warrants were signed, and only 72 were returned. Now, what I don't take away from those numbers is if I denied a search warrant and sent it back for something to be corrected in the affidavit, or I think maybe about 3, I felt like a violation notice should have just been written. The house was properly boarded. There were no exterior things that would cause concern for interior inspections, which is the reason they want a search warrant. That is just giving you some idea of what comes through. More importantly, because the violation, this is no indictment on how many violation notices are written. I don't know how many violation notices the Department of Building and Housing write. What I do see, if I have one defendant, and one defendant in particular that may have 150 properties, but they're there for one case, what I do is all of their properties I bring in. And some of these defendants have different names, but it's still the principal agent who I also bring in. And I have to say, because of virtual hearings and because of what I demand who comes, property managers of the property and not necessarily the property owner can come to the civil hearings. I require that the attorneys bring in the principal agent of that organization. So when I do a PSI, I make sure that My housing court specialists make sure that they're registered properly with the Secretary of State. We determine whether or not, especially for a lot of out-of-country investors, if they don't have an on-site property manager, physical property manager, part of my community control is that they get those property managers to manage their property, because how can you make sure the grass is cut, no one's parking on the grass, that the trash cans are moved back and things like that without knowing it? But I am going to just give you a little insight. So they do attend their hearings, their sentencing, and their status updates. And the status hearings are the community control hearings. One second. I probably should have put this in order before I came up here. So community control, we have, in 2023, we had 169 defendants on community control. And we had, of those 169 defendants, we had over 887 properties under the court's community control.
800 who? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
887 properties under the court's jurisdiction doing the community control.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Community control cases that were terminated early were 43, and that was by the end of December. Some of those were some defendants that owned possibly a little bit over 100 properties. But more than likely, most defendants average a minimum of 5 properties. What we also find out is that those 5 properties that we bring in have open violation notices. A majority of them always have open violation notices. And these violation notices can stem from all the way, I think I've seen 2012 to 2022, and those cases have not been prosecuted. But, you know, one of my community control is to bring those in and then have them correct those violations and ensure that those violation notices get put out, get closed out in the Department of Building and Housing's system.
On the point, Mr. Chairman,
Briefly, Councilman, go ahead.
isn't that the responsibility of building housing to deal with open violations? And first, I want to thank the judge for jumping in and having her court pull all of the information in on these egregious people who continue to violate the laws that we have on the books.
Through the chair to the councilman, I can't say, I mean, it's always their responsibility to make sure that the violation notices are closed, but I'm not sure when a violation notice is open how that works. I can assume how it works, but I don't necessarily know how it works. And I'm not here to say that they're not doing their job, because as soon as they realize violation notices are open, and we connect them, our housing specialists connect them with the defendant, they work diligently to make sure it's closed. A lot of times we hear from defendants, the inspector told me that they closed the violation notice. They don't necessarily know how to navigate the public system on checking to see if that violation notice is closed. Part of my job on the bench is to educate defendants about a process to make sure that their property is, up to par and is abiding by the goals of the court, which is to ensure that all properties are in code compliance and that there is no recidivism.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further, Judge, as you wrap up?
But no, I just wanted to say that these actions that happen, I want to say that part of the open violation notice and the request for civil sanctions is, I don't know how that looks in theory. They are to send a notice out to, I don't know if they're sending the notice out to the property owner or the renter that's residing in that, or the property manager. What I found out also is that a lot of property managers don't notify the property owners, and they just, disregard the notice to cut the grass, or they disregard the notice of hanging gutters. And in talking to the property owners, they will inform the court and provide receipts that they have paid to get these things done, but the property manager is not doing it. I'm not sure what the property manager is doing with the money, but I implore all defendants that do not reside in Ohio or the city of Cleveland to come in person and look at your property. You're investing $10,000 to get it repaired. You're assuming it's being repaired, and they're taking pictures, but that's not actually what's happening. It's a lot of things in play, and it's a lot of other things that need to be monitored. Property management of these properties for out-of-state people, that's something that should be heavily concentrated on. When you give a civil sanction, it's giving somebody the option to pay that civil fine, but is the problem being resolved? And I can say that what I see that comes across, no, that's not the case. That problem, that hanging gutter, if I could pay $250 and be done with this, who's going to go to make sure that that gutter was repaired? And that's where the problem lies when you switch over to going to a civil sanction, because I can say that and this is no offense to the code enforcement prosecutors, I think they're on the road to be a little bit more attuned to what's going on. But if you have open violations, a lot of open violations on properties, and imagine they had civil sanctions, they're still open and the gutters are still hanging from the pictures I'm looking at. So this is what the court is doing to make sure, the court's goal is always to make sure that all properties that rest in the city of Cleveland are in some kind of complete code compliance. Vacant properties are cleaned up, that vacant properties are properly boarded up according to the codes, graffiti is removed. It's a lot of things that we put in play in the court to make sure this is happening. I got to commend my housing court specialist who works diligently with the inspectors. It's a batch of inspectors that, work. It's about 5 that I see come across. But I just wanted to let the city council know that these things go into action and it comes into my court. I also want to say I thank Councilwoman Marr and Councilwoman Spencer, who especially Heather Lazar. When the housing court specialists reach out to you and we're trying to streamline that process, I would ask that city council just respond back or have a staff that responds back. For property that rests in there, we love to hear feedback from council people to let them know, hey, we are, from the court's perspective, working to have these problematic properties in your ward taken care of through community control.
Thank you. Thank you, Judge. Great information. I know there's been some changes, some amendments. There's a lot of information from last Tuesday and more information today that will maybe further clarify some of the thoughts about civil penalties and so forth. I don't think it's a replacement. It is an additional tool for the department to use when we have things that we need to get people attention with. But no, hear you loud and clear. Any changes we do as relates to housing and code enforcement and prosecution the court will be impacted, right? And so that's where we all kind of band together and figure this all out. And so I appreciate your thoughts and your comments and your concerns. We thank you. And some of that we'll get early. I know we'll be getting that in another 3 weeks as well. All right.
Yes, we're still editing and going through a comparison chart for it.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Judge. We appreciate your comments. Thank you for coming this
Thank
morning.
you.
Mr.
Thank
Chairman,
Thank
can we ask questions to the judge?
We're going to take brief questions for the judge. We have a long agenda today, so we don't need to get bogged down and keep repeating ourselves, okay? So I ask people to just ask the question, all right? Councilman Jones and then Councilman Harsh. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, to the judge, thank you. You talked about community control. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works in your court and how other council members can also participate?
To the chair, through the chairman to Councilman Jones. Community control is probation. We have 2 types of probation that would occur, one for an individual. Most individuals own their own property. If they're residential properties and not residential renters, usually we would track them into SIP, which is the housing court's program to allow them to make the repairs and get the case dismissed when those repairs are done. You have to have, this has to be the property you live in, and then it has to be the only property you own in the city of Cleveland. At least that's the way that I enforce our SIP under my administration. The other one is organization. So when I put an organization on community control, once the court takes a plea and there's a finding of guilt, I order a PSI, which is a pre-sentence investigation report from my housing court specialists, who are our community control officers, and they would do a workup. They do an intake form, and then they ask them, do you own any other properties where you're the principal agent under a different name? And this is done twofold. One is to make sure that there's no violation of community control because you have a new case coming in. The other one is to bring all of their properties in the jurisdiction so that we can clean up a lot of their properties. And we've gotten a lot of positive feedback from our housing court specialists and our community control from some owners, business, that were overwhelmed. I can say, for example, it was one defendant who's done with the court that owned 26 properties in Ward 1. A lot of them needed repairs, a lot of them needed lead safe certificates, which we find out a lot of the landlords and property owners do not have. So it's things that I order that they do, that they provide updated rental registration to make sure all their rental properties that are not vacant are registered with the city Department of Building and Housing. If it is a vacant, boarded up property, they need to get exempt, because what will happen is they'll get a citation for not registering property or lead safe certification, and the property is not bringing them any income. So they needed to have that property exempt from the list of Department of Building and Housing and notify them that, hey, this is not a viable property at this moment. That's including any kind of massive renovations that's going on with those properties. We also make sure that people do not park on the grass, including their construction workers. We also make sure that the grass and the shrubbery is cut, that there's no dumping on the property, that graffiti is removed, that if the property is vacant, that it's properly boarded up, and that all violation notices, we search and pull every violation notice on that particular property, whether it's before the court or not. And we give them a copy of those violation notices, and I order that those violations in the violation notice be abated, and that the violation notice be closed. That means it usually has to be a follow-up inspection by the inspectors, and that inspector that initially issued it, whether it was recently or 10 years from now, that be done. And if I'm noticing through the pictures my housing court specialists take, that houses that are currently occupied and there are exterior concerns with it, that they be ordered to allow an interior and exterior inspection of that property, so that I know that those occupants, those renters, are doing, they're living in a safe, habitable place. Because if there's no lead safe certification, then it's not going to be a good interior inspection. And so those are some of the, and I look at them also. The open violations usually are where a former tenant complained. And so I can always tell, because it'll say missing fire alarms, missing, fire detectors, missing carbon monoxide detectors, and it's a lot of interior damage, electrical sockets and things like that. Well, has this citation closed? A lot of times, no, it has not been. Sometimes it has been. So we just want to clean up the record for the property to make sure that there is no violations or recidivism.
Mr. Chairman, to the judge, I really appreciate you being here this morning and giving a little bit more insight on what you do. I've been into so many properties that are horrible, and I don't know why they have been allowed to be in existence. I've had the unfortunate opportunity of seeing even CMHA fail at their own inspections, dealing with issues and cases in my community. You talked about boots on the ground and code enforcement prosecutors. How many code enforcement prosecutors do we have that come before you?
To the chairman, through the chairman to Councilman Jones, I believe Chief Roberts is here. He can answer that question more so than me.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Roberts.
Mr. Roberts, how many code enforcement prosecutors go to the housing court?
Currently have 4. Plans are to get 3 more.
Okay. And then, Mr. Chairman, with boots on the ground, the judge talked about in 2023 that you had approximately 1,368 cases filed, which was a tremendous drop from the year previously of 2,200 cases. We heard the testimony, Mr. Chairman, of the director last week that we have 100 inspectors, and I found that to break my heart. So, Mr. Chairman, to the judge, the citation violations and all the notices that are inspected, do you have a breakdown on those inspectors that bring that to you, what those numbers look like?
I don't have a breakdown because the inspectors are the one that drive the case to the prosecutor, through the chair to the councilman. The inspectors are the one that take the cases to the code enforcement prosecutors to make a determination on whether or not charges will be issued. And so what happens is we get the case, I don't touch the file until there's an offer to plea. We know that with the dismissals, there's also, in a plea agreement, there's an agreement to not only the cases. It's to where we are now that if you have someone with 100 days of citations, LLC, and there'll be a plea offer to 10 days, a 10 count, and Nolly 90 counts. We're trying to extract that information, but the question comes is there's a plea, but then there's sometimes not necessarily, and I think it is improving, that has there been attempts to abate the violation notice? Because some of the 100-day violations tends to be a little egregious, and it's from 2021, let's say.
Right. What I'm trying to get at, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, to the judge, a little bit of explanation there. What I'm trying to find out is production, correct? Mm-hmm. So if we have 100 inspectors, for an example, and we have 1,368 cases filed last year, that's, if you divide it up, it's like, what, 75 cases? Mm-hmm. or maybe 70 cases per inspector for the entire year, work in terms of Cleveland. So I guess my question is, do you have the ability or capacity of those cases that do get to a point when you're looking at the 1,368 cases filed, can you determine what those inspectors and who those inspectors are? Is there some inspectors that are like, just kicking butt down there, and they're down there most of the time, all the time, versus maybe one or twice, two others, maybe two? I'm just trying to get an idea, because we're in the proposition right here talking about putting new laws that we want to put in place to enforce and have the tools necessary to hold accountable some egregious people, which I'm not against, but it makes no sense if our employment side is not corrected.
Through the chairman to the councilman, I just know I see about 5 particular names that's always on the violation notice, 5 to 6. But also keep in mind that some of them were health inspectors. That's a totally different department. I haven't seen that many health inspection violation codes come through. Not sure the reason for that. But I can say about 5 that I know that I can say off the top of my head when I look down at the violation notice, their names are there.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I make a records request to the director of the 100 inspectors or 107 inspectors that we have on the books that work for the city of Cleveland. I want to know what their production is. How many enforcement, what are they doing in the field? Because right now, Mr. Chairman, I'll tell you, our neighborhood has been very upset and angry over the course of 30-some years. And Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Scott, in our community, code enforcement is a big deal. And we've sat here at this table for 25-some years talking about it and the lack of it. And so when I sit here at this table, I'm really frustrated at the fact, Mr. Chairman, that I'm still dealing with properties I've been having problems with for the last 6 years and haven't had any remedies to it. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's a problem for me.
Understood, Councilman. Thank you for your comments. Thank you, Judge, for the response. And Councilman Harsh is going to wrap us up with the judge. We're going to move on to ACAR. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be super brief. Through the chair to Her Honor, thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
Aside from a lawyer,
Go ahead.
through the chair to the judge, who is allowed to represent an owner in court for a violation or an eviction, aside from a lawyer?
Only a lawyer.
Only a lawyer can represent an owner in court.
Yes.
Okay.
And can I just say, through the chair to Councilman Harsh, a organization is by law not a person. And so if you're not a person, you have no voice. That's why you have to get an attorney to represent you, because anybody on behalf of that organization is they're acting as though they are an attorney.
Okay.
And that is everywhere, because even in a civil sanction, in all honesty, the owner of that property should not be represented. No one should be there on behalf of that property, because you can't put that property in jail. You can only give them fines, and you can give them community control service. But they can't really speak on behalf of their thing, because it's twofold. You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're an individual and you own property, then you can get everything attached to you for that property being,
And all I want to clarify through the chair to the judge is that no property agent can come in and represent a property owner in front of your court unless they also happen to be a lawyer.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And through the chair to the judge, can you refuse an eviction can you refuse an eviction if a property is not currently registered with the city of Cleveland?
No.
If a company comes with an eviction, they're not registered, can you refuse that eviction request?
Through the chair to the councilman, when you say refuse an eviction, are you saying, and they're not registered, are you saying rental registration?
Correct. If a lawyer comes in and says, I'm here to evict such and such a tenant from this address, and you look and see that that address is not on the rental registration, can you refuse that until they register?
Right. We wouldn't look on the rental registration, but what we require from the court through the local rules is that you provide that you are registered with the City of Cleveland through the rental registration, updated, so the City of Cleveland Department of Building and Housing give them a rental registration certificate, and all of them expires March 1st of the year before. So
And if they don't have that certificate, what happens?
they will not go through to a hearing.
Okay. And so through the chair, if we add a local agent in charge to the rental registry, it would just be a part of that same requirement for the rental registry. It'd be one and the same.
Through the chair to the councilman, I'm not clear. Can you ask that question again?
Sure. If we add a local agent in charge to the rental registry, so we say register the owner and a local agent in charge, it's all part of the same rental registration form. It's still the same form that you require before you can proceed with an eviction, through the chair.
Yes, through the chair to the councilman, yes.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you,
Thank
Judge.
you. Thank
you
you.
for your time. We'll let you get back across the road there and get to the heavy lifting. Thank you. Before we go to ACAR, Mr. Valerino and Mr. John Lynch, we have two residents who are here, Meg Weingard and Joanne Blanchard, if I'm not mistaken. Is Meg Weingard still here? Come on, Meg. Allow Meg to come up for about 2 minutes to share any comments that she would like to. Meg is from the Morelands Group.
From the who, Mr. Chair?
Morelands Group. You can sit here.
Okay.
We did hear from Meg last Tuesday as well.
Yes,
All right.
thank you. I want to reiterate that I'm speaking on behalf of the Morelands.
Microphone. Just kind of come a little closer. There you go.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Morelands Group, whose goal is to preserve, protect, and advocate for the 2,000 units in 80 apartment buildings in the apartment corridor around Shaker Square. We want to underscore how strongly we feel about residents first and our support for it. We see firsthand the problems with the current system. We see tenants trapped in their buildings with no heat, broken elevators, broken doors, trash, water leaks, subsequent mold. We see buildings in this historic district decaying as each winter goes by with blight. Crime issues are increasing. We implore you to pass this legislation before our community becomes a wasteland.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you. Is Joanne Blanchard still here? Come on up. Absolutely. All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
You have 2 minutes. right.
Good morning, Council. Thanks for hearing me. I'm Joanne Blanchard. I am a long-term resident of Shaker Square, and I'd like to speak to, very briefly, I think rental registration is very important. We had an issue in our building at Shaker Square, a historic building, no heat since before Thanksgiving. We had some sub-zero weather, and it was quite a problem. Who do we call? We have 7 phone numbers to call to try to reach out to someone. We have no posted rental registration in the building, no posted property agent information. I'm also a part of Moreland's group, and thanks to their advocacy and to Councilwoman Deborah Gray, Inspector Rebecca Hartman, we were able to finally locate the property agent, Joe Bobeck Jr., and so we have had the boiler restored, and we have some sort of heat coming in. That's one of the issues with our property. So this legislation is very important. And I love Shaker Square. It's a historic district. These buildings are beautiful. Previous landlords loved the buildings, put in the necessary maintenance, took care of their tenants, and we need that sort of ownership, and we need follow-up. Updating rental registration, I believe, is a very powerful tool to do that. We don't even know who to call. I had to search it. I'd be a private eye and find out who to call. So
Got it.
we do have heat, but that's one of many issues. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you so very much. All right. We're going to bring up our friends from ACAR, Mr. Lynch, Mr. Valerino. We got a gap in here. Mr. Vando, do you want to slide down? One. I'm sorry, we also have David as well. All right. Tom, you want to move on the end? If Mr. Lynch want to come on up? We got time playing musical chairs this morning. It'd have been better if you'd had that pound cake. I was looking in the hall. No. All right. We could probably flip one of the microphones here. Yeah. We have to fix our mic situation here. All right. Again, good morning. Thank you for being here, Ms. Valerino. I know that you yourself and members of ACAR reached out and asked to come before the body today to share some comments and concerns regarding Residents First. Go ahead.
Chairman Hairston, Vice Chair Santana, members of the Development Planning and Sustainability Committee, council members, city officials, and guests. My name is Mike Valerino, and I am the CEO for the Akron-Cleveland Association of Realtors, or ACAR, a trade association for real estate professionals in Northeast Ohio. And I am joined by 2 members, Dave Sharkey of Progressive Urban and John Lynch of Keller Williams and former Cleveland City Councilman. On behalf of our nearly 6,500 members, thank you for the opportunity to comment on Ordinance 1039-2023, also known as Residents First. And before I continue, I would like to acknowledge the work that Director Sally Martin O'Toole has done over her career. Her passion for housing challenges in Northeast Ohio is clear. And we have appreciated working with her in various capacities over the years. Like you, ACAR wants to see Cleveland and all of our communities thriving with safe and healthy housing options and neighborhoods for all who desire to make Northeast Ohio home. Our local governments certainly have a role in achieving that. While this ordinance appears to be a well-intentioned proposal, we do want to highlight a few areas of concern, as there may be unintended consequences to some of the policy amendments and areas where legal interpretation may need further consideration. First, as a trade association for realtors, we must address the local agent in charge component of the ordinance. Our members are rightfully concerned about being held as liable as the property owner. They are advisors and conduits of information, but they cannot control or enforce the actions of their clients. We certainly recognize the need to have a local point of contact for rental properties with their consent. However, we would ask for clarification in the definition of agent to exempt realtors. As members of ACAR and the National Association of Realtors, realtors are held to a higher standard of professionalism through its code of ethics. It is important to note not all real estate licensees are realtors. You may be aware that members of the public are permitted and encouraged to file a complaint with ACAR if they believe a violation of the Realtor Code of Ethics has occurred. ACAR has local staff dedicated specifically to ensure the Code of Ethics is followed and enforced within when a violation occurs. Additionally, there is concern that agents functioning in a purely sales capacity may be named without consent as the local agent in charge. Once a sale is complete, the realtor's responsibility has concluded. Realtors are not code enforcers. Agents functioning as property managers may have extended responsibility per their contract with a property owner. Again, we would ask for an exemption for realtors in the term agent. Next, we encourage you to eliminate Chapter 3106, which covers point-of-sale inspections for vacant residential and commercial properties. It is clear to us that point-of-sale inspections are barriers to homeownership, especially when there are associated fees and escrow requirements. We've heard countless stories of buyers needing to look in communities without point of sale because they cannot assume the violations and associated escrow. Their timeline for rehabbing a home may not be in line with the city's, or they are a seller who simply cannot afford to make the necessary repairs, and now they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. We cannot ignore the various court cases in Ohio, namely in Bedford, Portsmouth, and Oakwood, that have addressed the unconstitutionality of various components of these mandated inspections. I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge the good work done in places like Berea, where exterior point of sale was eliminated, Euclid and Maple Heights, and the leader of these rollbacks, Garfield Heights, which was the first city to eliminate its escrow and then interior inspections about a decade ago. The market was very different then, as you all know, but the change that the city saw in its market was something. Prices jumped quickly. I can recall being in a meeting when Realtor Seth Task found multiple listings that were over $80,000, which at the time was practically unheard of. If we truly want to increase homeownership, the city cannot have antiquated and unfair policies like point of sale in place. Think about it. If you are a buyer and have done what you can to save for a down payment and closing cost, what happens when you find out when the city you want to call home requires you to come up with additional funds? If you don't have the money for a down payment, closing costs, your own private inspection, appraisal, and some money in the bank to start making repairs, plus money to sit in an escrow account, what do? You look elsewhere, leaving the door open for an investor who may have deeper pockets to take on all of these additional expenses. That said, we need investors. There are more investors out there doing the right thing than there are bad actors, often referenced when the topic of maintenance comes up. We have heard this notion over the years that the city needs to do these inspections to allegedly protect the buyer. This could not be further from the truth. According to a report shared by the National Association of Realtors, the vast majority, 86% of new buyers are hiring private home inspectors that work for the buyer. Thankfully, here in Ohio, those home inspectors are now required to be licensed. Buyers know to beware and to protect themselves. ACAR encourages the city to implement and enforce its existing maintenance code instead. If we struggle to enforce our current code, how can we realistically expect to enforce more and more layers of regulation? One way cities have successfully enforced existing codes is through systematic exterior-only inspections of all properties, not just those for sale or for rent. A municipality can be divided into an appropriate number of sections that are inspected from the street annually. For example, Section 1 would be inspected in year 1, Section 2 in year 2, and so on. Consistency is needed for this model to work, but it can be done with proper staffing levels that would treat all owners equally and all properties equally. Complaint-driven reports would continue to exist. As an alternative to the vacant building registration for commercial properties, ACAR would suggest a review of the City of Akron's vacant building registration, Ordinance 207-2018. ACAR staff and commercial brokers sat down with city officials and went through an entire proposal. The brokers were able to share the reality of commercial real estate, and the result was an amended version that everyone could live with, which included a registration, a reasonable fee based on size, a local authorized agent if the owner was not a resident of Summit County or a contiguous county, and most importantly, a plan for the building. Regarding the expanded rental regulations, ACAR members have shared their concerns about the proposed added costs of being a housing provider in the city of Cleveland. They've also reported that compliance will cause them to increase their rent amounts. We know that the median area income for the city is approximately $35,000. Using the standard that 30% rule for housing costs, the average household would allow for approximately $875 per month for rent. According to apartments.com, the average rent in Cleveland as of January 2024 is $1,202. The city must reconsider, and ACAR would again encourage enforcement of existing code, including the lead-safe policy, rather than tacking on additional costs and hoops that will inevitably be passed on to the end user, the residential tenant, or potentially a small business owner renting and owning a once vacant space. These changes may exacerbate housing affordability challenges in Cleveland. Like point of sale inspections, these expanded rental regulations also come with potential privacy violations for both the owner and the tenant. Further, a case in North Canton, Ohio was filed last year looking at its use of administrative warrants for failure to consent. ACAR encourages the city to re-examine its planned use of such a tactic. Our region and country are experiencing a very complex real estate market. Despite this, Cleveland is often touted as the next emerging market. ACAR's message is clear. Instead of adding new layers of red tape, the city should continue its efforts to enforce existing code and to allow policies like the lead-safe ordinance to take hold. Media reports over the last few months have shown us that the city can make a difference with existing regulations. Finally, I know that we would all welcome a higher homeownership rate in our city and region. Finding ways to provide for down payment assistance, grants or low-interest loans for home repair, home buyer education. I know we're planning a session right now in Councilwoman House Jones's ward. And community amenities in all of our neighborhoods are pieces to the puzzle that we can collaboratively address to boost homeownership. Again, let's work together to enforce the existing code, avoid adding costly regulations, and keep Cleveland a home for all. Thank you. And if it's okay, at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Sharkey from Progressive Urban Real Estate.
All right, Mr. Sharkey.
Mr. Chairman, Council, thank you for having us. My name is Dave Sharkey. I'm with Progressive Urban Real Estate. I've been a resident of the city of Cleveland since 1987, living in varied neighborhoods such as Stockyards, Detroit Shoreway, downtown, Ohio City, and raised my family in St. Clair Superior. Progressive Urban Real Estate's been around since 1986. The goal of Progressive Urban was to get people to move to the city. As a child, I promoted the city of Cleveland, and I got my master's in urban studies, again, to promote the city of Cleveland. My career has been promoting the city of Cleveland. This is all I've done. I guess I'm going to add some color commentary to what Mike said, but the local agent in charge, as a realtor, we have to pay errors and omissions insurance. In case we do something wrong, we get sued, there's insurance. It's expensive. If the E&O providers get a whiff of this local agent in charge, I think it's going to cause big problems. Rates are going to go up, or we will get dumped, especially if with commercial properties. I think it's going to cause a problem. To the point I was telling a story earlier that I got a referral last night, which is great. This referral's from a Howard Hanna agent, and he is trying to sell a mixed-use property on 117th Street. He can't sell it because Howard Hanna will not let their residential agents sell commercial property. Now, commercial property starts with 5 units, so it could really look like residential, but is commercial. Now, all of those residential agents at Howard Hanna can't sell it. Good for me. I got the referral. Point of sale. Point of sale to me equals abandonment and demolition, and maybe sometimes that's going to be a good thing. But when you look at the housing stock in the city of Cleveland, and you look at places like Shaker, Cleveland Heights, you know, they started out at a higher level. Their houses were in better condition. Place like Shaker, their houses are newer. There's more money there. People took care of their properties. When you look at the city, especially in the inner city, some of the commercial corridors, you were looking at very old properties. You're talking 1800s. The properties, they're totally different. You know, a 1950s bungalow in Lee Harvard is going to be much easier to fix up than that 1800s home that everything was custom built. The windows were custom built. Nothing measures. There's no 2x4. Every single one's totally different. You go into the walls, everything's completely different. What that does is you get into that, costs go through the roof, and it's like all of a sudden, oh, we don't have enough money in this neighborhood to add this much cost to this property. We're going to have to walk away from it. Who owns that property? I don't know. You know, is it somebody who's in a nursing home now? Somebody's parent? The family makes a decision. What are we going to do with this? Walk away. That's, to me, worst case scenario. Then what happens? It sits there. Now we've got that problem of vacant abandoned property. And a lot of times, as we see throughout the city, full of vacant lots, which I know we're trying to get vacant lots used again, more demolition. So I actually think this will add to the land bank's, you know, store of vacant property. At best, what this will do is decrease value. So again, you grew up in that inner city neighborhood. Your mom just went to the nursing home. You don't know what to do with the property. Now we've got this. We have a vacant property. We've got point of sale. Oh, well, now all this huge list has to be done before we can sell this. Now, all of a sudden, what are we going to do? What's the property worth? The value just totally sunk. In Shaker Heights, I have a great investor. And this guy has never been to Cleveland, works for Google, has a lot of money, doesn't know what to do with it, so he invests in Cleveland. He put so much money into his properties, and his properties are gorgeous. So he's always sending me Shaker Heights listings. So finally, he bought one. And we went through Shaker Heights point of sale. I can guarantee you he will never buy another house in Shaker, and that's Shaker's loss because this guy puts a lot of money and invests in his property and has good management and good tenants. Myself, I own a property right now. I live at 1800 Fulton. My property was abandoned. It was tax foreclosure. It was condemned. Now, in a lot of people's. And I was lucky to be able to get this through the help with Ohio City Near West, or Ohio City Inc. And, but I looked at this property and I was like, oh, I like it. And then I said, you know what, this is just too much for me. The original house was built in 1853. It was a very complicated property. It's masonry. At the last minute, I was like, yeah, we're going to do it, you know. And so I fixed it up, moved my family in there. If there was another layer of, you know, point of sale or other regulations, you know, when I made the decision no, but then went back to it, if there was another layer of regulation, I probably still be living on East 40th, which I love my house in East 40th, but I probably would not have gone through with it because that would have been just enough to like, you know what, I don't want to deal with anymore. You know, I don't want to put money in escrow. You know, of course, it was condemned. I had to go through a lot, but how much can you take, you know? Rental affordability, I think that, Mike hit, I think that is important. Every cost that comes along, an investor, they're not thinking like, oh, I'll just pay more money. It's like, well, where's that money going to come from? Who are you renting to? It's going to come from the tenant. And what I'm hearing over and over again from investors is it's harder to do business in Cleveland. And that may sound like a good thing for your bad investors, but for your good investors, it's a bad thing and it's bad for the city. It's bad for tenants. Insurance costs have gone up. and that's across the country. But, that little bit, if that deal's, you're only making this much on that deal, then that insurance cost goes up, now the house doesn't make sense. Got to raise rents. Water bills are high. Everybody knows that. Interest rates are high. Now, all of a sudden, we've got some other regulations from the city of Cleveland adding on to that. Were you going to pay it out of your pocket? No, you're an investor. You want to make money. You're providing a service, and you get paid for that service. You're going to raise your rents. On the commercial side of things, I have always been very concerned, and I'm sure you are all too, about your commercial corridors. What do people see when they come into the city? They don't see houses. They see commercial corridors. If they go off the streets, maybe they start to see some houses. Generally, our commercial corridors look terrible.
Yes.
And they're the rare spots that look good or are up and coming or have held their own over time. A lot of these commercial buildings, these mixed use, are small owners. I have people that want to buy mixed use buildings, and there are so many barriers to entry to buy these buildings and fix them up and open your business. Number one is lending. It is extremely difficult to buy a building. I have people come to me and say, oh, I want to buy a building. And oh, well, how much money do you have? It's like, oh, I've got 10% down. No. You're looking at 20, 35% down. You can't just decide to buy one. It has to cash flow. You have to have a business plan. All the lenders, they don't want to deal with it. They want to send you to the SBA. So now you've got this whole huge process that you've got to go through to try to buy this $99,000 building in Slavic Village. And I'm going through this with a buyer. He's tried to buy one twice to open a coffee shop. He lives upstairs. You would think this would be easy. $99,000, and he's still trying to buy this building. Taxes are higher on commercial buildings. There's a disincentive to fix up these small commercial buildings. Insurance rates, again, those are higher. I feel, this is an overall thing, I think, with life, but with regulation, there are those that conform and gladly conform, whether they like it or not, and there's those that don't. And so when you add on these other layers of regulation to achieve a good goal, the goal's good, I get it. The people that are conforming now are the ones that are going to be conforming and paying the price, and the people that aren't are still not going to be. Are you going to hit those people that aren't conforming to this? They're still breaking the law. They're still causing trouble. And who's paying the price? The people that are following the law now. In the end, in my conclusion, investors do provide a service, and I am a real estate agent, so obviously this is going to affect my company. It's going to affect my business life. But Progressive Urban Real Estate has been supporting the city, has been working in the city this whole time. We are city experts. Just as that I've got that referral from Howard Hanna yesterday, we will continue to get referrals because we're the ones that are going to figure out these regulations and work through them. So my business might actually benefit from this, but in the end, I think it's bad for the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharkey. Councilman Lynch?
Thank you, Chair.
Can you hit the button? Green. There you go.
Good. You've got all these newfangled things.
Absolutely.
I was just thinking, 50 years ago, I was on that side of the table. And also, I do recognize the fact that I appreciate the fact you have Mike Polancik's picture up there with the 1903 class that came to City Council.
I know he's listening.
I'm sure he is. He was wearing breeches when I first was here. Anyhow, we have the same goal as revitalizing neighborhoods and preserving communities. I'm listening to this, and I'm listening to what I heard when I first came into council in 76 or 74, forget the year, 74. Didn't have enough inspectors. Couldn't get the inspectors to go to court to get things done. And we were trying to pass new laws, which we never really brought anybody in from the industry, either in commercial realtors, residential realtors, property owners, to really talk about how we could do this thing together. And that, I think, is still part of the problem. I can recall, and my kids still don't want to talk to me because I used to take them on these trips in the neighborhood after I go to church on Sunday. And we'd drive through the neighborhood, and I'd write down the things that were wrong. Houses had a gutter missing, or they had a porch missing, the garbage was out, and all that sort of stuff. And I'd turn it in each week to the housing commissioner. And each week I'd say, what happened? Well, we'll get to that. I did that for 10 years. And nothing really happened. Nothing really happened. But the private industry is really why Cleveland took off. The private industry got involved and started investing. And they didn't do it because we didn't have point of sale. They did it because they saw a community which was good. When you involve point of sale, we've found this in other communities. You put a point of sale piece of legislation in there, and you're going to impact that one person that's selling their house, or that many people that are selling that house at that time. But the house next door, which has never been sold, is going to be a problem. You got to take care of everything. On the commercial side, we don't want to see this bond. The bond, I think, is going to be prohibitive. You're better off hiring new inspectors, working with the court, working with the industry to figure out how to get this done. The bond is not going to do anything. The commercial streets that you're talking about, each neighborhood, all of our neighborhoods, and I still live in the city. I was born and raised in the city of Cleveland. I still live here. Each neighborhood is judged by what the main street looks like. What does Lorraine Avenue look like? What's Clark? What's Broadway? What's Harvard? Those streets have to have a special concentration. If the city wants them improved, there should be a concentration on what's going to be done to improve those streets. People judge our neighborhoods on those streets. And we really haven't, I'm saying collectively, we have not really addressed that. That's what should be done. This bond stuff and other things, I don't think it's going to work. The agent in charge, that's another liability that's placed upon somebody without our knowledge, where you're going to just possibly say the agent in charge has to be the realtor that's handling that property. That shouldn't be the case. The owner should pick that person. As the judge said, the person that they pick is an attorney, because that's who goes to court. We want to work with you. This piece of legislation is not the approach to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for your comments. I know I see our director and Mr. Davis were squirming in their seats a little bit, and so I want to make sure that we pivot to Director and Austin if they would like to share any response to some of the concerns that we've heard.
Mr. Chairman, I do have questions to the gentleman's testimony.
We're going to get to them, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. All right, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, esteemed council and guests. Realtors and I go way back, and we've been friends for a long time. And in my previous role, they were part of my kitchen cabinet. And I did a lot of things in lockstep with them, and I truly appreciate where they're coming from. I totally appreciate their concern for Cleveland neighborhoods, and I believe it's very genuine. There are a few things that we diverge on in terms of our agreement, and I know there's definite concerns here about local agent in charge. There's concerns about doing vacant building inspections. One of the things I do want to point out, if you would hand me the remote, if you don't mind. Thank you, Mike. We listened to the stakeholders. So in pulling this together, as you all know, we didn't do this in a vacuum. We did this by listening. And we went on listening tours, and we went to see ACAR, and we went to see our local community development corporations, and many other stakeholders, including our friends here in the Morelands Group, who have been suffering at the hands of some non-responsible landlords. So at the end of the day, we make decisions that we believe are best for all, and we know that for some, it may not be optimal. Local agent in charge, we need someone to be responsible. So when we have out-of-state investors and we have out-of-the-country investors, as you all know we do, We need somebody locally, yes, that we can hold accountable. But, some of the amendments that we've made to this since it was initially introduced are going to address some of the concerns. So, for instance, a clause to indemnify the local agent in charge so that the owner, there's some standing for the local agent in charge to go back to that owner and take him to court if need be to say, I need to recoup these costs that I incurred as a result of this ordinance. It's not my fault. Also, the disclosures. So we would not appoint a local agent in charge unless that local agent in charge signed off on the form and said, yes, I'm agreeing to this, and I know what I'm agreeing to. So that's really, really critical here. This has been used in Chicago. This has been used in Minneapolis. So not just South Euclid, which, is a different and smaller city, the size of West Park, but let's look at our peer cities of Minneapolis and Chicago. There's no carve-out for realtors. It works. Obviously, nobody's lost their license. They haven't lost their business. It works. We need accountability, and we needed it decades ago, but it's time to start. If we continue to do the same thing over and over, we get the same result. So in terms of the vacant building inspection, let's definitely discuss that. And many of our slide deck here is going to focus on that because we realize that's the core objection. People are afraid. And perhaps there's some legitimacy to the fear of, well, Mrs. Jones goes to sell her house and now there's this barrier of this inspection. Her buyer's going to not want to take this on. Let's bear in mind, we've eliminated any escrow requirement from this. There is no escrow requirement. We're simply asking to get inside the property and cite what's wrong. Now, you all know decades and decades of disinvestment. You know what we're going to find. You know what we can't see from the outside. You know why we need to get inside. You know what the private market will do. Sometimes just cosmetic stuff, and they hide the stuff that's wrong. That's not fair to Cleveland residents who want to buy these homes. They believe they're buying one thing, but they're not. They're buying something entirely different. They're in over their head. It's too late. But people have made their commissions. They've sold their property. That's not the answer. So what are we really asking for? We're asking for an inspection. We're not asking for escrow. We're asking for the buyer to assume the violations and repair it within a reasonable period of time. We say 6 months. We also say we will provide extensions with progress. So we're not going to say we're taking you to court, knocking you over the head if you're not done in 6 months, because one of the core concerns that came up from this body and others is that we have that guy in the neighborhood who repairs houses, but it takes him like 4 years because he only has so much time and so many resources, but he does a good thing for the neighborhood, and we don't want to harm him. We agree. We don't want to harm him either. We certainly want him to make continual progress, but we don't want to not work with him if he needs additional time. And so this is very explicit in the ordinance. Now we're saying this. We're saying we'll absolutely work with him, providing extensions as long as there's demonstrated progress. And I think that's absolutely fair. We are still asking for the commercial bond. However, we are saying, and this is only related to commercial industrial properties here, not residential, and the inspections are only on 1 to 3 family residential. So it's not going to be the apartment building. It's not going to be the mixed-use building. We're talking about 1 to 3 family only requiring the inspection. And that's, you all have seen it. You know what the stock looks like. We need to do something. We need to do something drastic. So for the bond for commercial industrial, if there's no code violations, board ups, or it's actively being rehabbed with permits pulled, we're not going to ask for that bond. And I think that's fair too. We're asking, we know also, and some of you are probably equally frustrated as us, that people hang on to commercial vacant buildings for far too long without attempting to sell them. They don't want to do anything with them. They're just holding them, hoping the market will turn or whatever. We also want to create a little bit of a disincentive for just sitting on things and letting them rot, because that's not fair. And those commercial corridors, as you said, really are the gateway to these neighborhoods, and we need to make them beautiful. So I understand where I think we align, and we want to do the best for the neighborhood. I respect you all and greatly appreciate you for what you do. And Mr. Lynch, you just always add so much color commentary everywhere you go. And I'm surprised that Councilman Polinsik hasn't run out here. So that's kind of my response to that. And then I have a presentation as well, so that I think will answer many of these questions. But thank you all.
Gotcha. Thank you, Director. We're going to move to questions from the committee to our guests. We're going to first start with Councilman Harsh and then move to Councilman Jones. But again, please be mindful of our time. Director would like to go back through her presentation and highlight some revisions that have been made through additional conversations since our last time meeting on Tuesday. Councilman Harsh.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate gentlemen coming in. Mr. Ballerino, Mr. Sharkey, Mr. Lynch. As most people know, I've been a real estate agent. I was a member of the Realtors Association. And while Mr. Sharkey probably sold more houses last week than I sold in my career, I have gone through the process and I understand the efforts that go into transferring property. And whenever somebody asks me what they should do about buying or selling a house, I tell them to find a local realtor that they can work with, somebody that sells properties in the neighborhood, because nobody knows property transfers better than realtors. So I appreciate you coming to the table today with your experience and expertise. To the two main issues here, through the chair to whoever wants to answer, the local agent in charge, it should be understood, is exempt for all local property owners. Anybody that lives in Cuyahoga or a contiguous county does not need one. Those people simply list themselves. They are their own local agent in charge. So if you're a local investor in Cleveland, Summit, in Medina County, you just put yourself down because you're already close enough to handle that. And I think we should all just understand that there's no local agent for people that live in Cuyahoga or a county adjacent to us. But through the chair, gentlemen, for out-of-state investors, there's already state law that the Ohio Revised Code requires out-of-state investors to have property management within the state of Ohio. And I believe we all understand that that person has to fall under a couple of categories. They must be a lawyer. They must be a broker. They must be a designated employee of that company that only manages properties for that company. And then there are a few other exemptions around manufactured home communities and a few other exemptions that don't really get into the real world. But through the chair, would a real estate agent ever list themselves as a property manager for an owner? Can you imagine a scenario where a real estate agent would say, I'm the property manager?
As the property manager for, let's say, an investment property, if the owner designates you to manage the property, it's to manage the property, period.
Would that be legal through the chair for any property owner outside of Ohio?
Through the chair, it's legal with anybody. As local agent in charge, however, shouldn't be designated by legislation and forcing us to become local agents in charge. That's a responsibility of the owner and whoever they're going to pick as the local agent in charge. It should not be the realtor. I have had properties in the past where I've sold the properties. I'm listing a property.
This is sort of my question to the chair, Mr. Lynch. Why would any realtor ever list themselves as the agent in charge? Why would they do that?
They wouldn't, but I don't want to be required by the city to have the city say that the local agent in charge can be the local realtor. That should not be the case.
So through the chair, I would agree that a realtor would never want to put themselves down as the local agent in charge. The realtor's job to their client ends after the sale is complete. The realtor is there to facilitate the sale, the transfer of the property. After that is complete, the realtor's job is done, and all they really have to do if they're the agent for the buyer is tell the buyer, hey, by the way, you don't live in Cuyahoga or Summit. You need a local agent you're going to put on your rental registry. Go find that person. I'm struggling to understand why a realtor would feel compelled to ever do that, to list themselves as the agent in charge.
I believe the concern is that either the property owner would do that, and the proposal does not explicitly rule that out. I think that's our concern. The things that you're saying, we agree with. The proposal should and the code should align with that.
Yeah, I'm not. So through the chair to the director, I'm not aware of us of us allowing anybody to be listed as local agent without their approval.
Correct.
So the local agent has to agree to be listed as the local agent in charge. And so when the realtor is done selling the house or whoever their agent for, and that is done, their only role in this might be to tell the buyer, by the way, you need to have an agent. If you don't live in Cuyahoga, Summit, Medina, Lake, whatever, Lorraine, that you need to have a local agent lined up for this property. And if that investor doesn't live in Ohio, state law already requires them to have a broker, a lawyer, or a dedicated employee within the state. I don't know why any real estate agent would ever want to volunteer to be that person, especially since state law does not allow them to be a property manager for out-of-state investors. And this is a problem that we see far too often, Mr. Chair. We have real estate agents running around as property managers, and we know they're not allowed to do that. And sometimes they're doing it at the behest of their broker, and we need to talk to those brokers because they're not allowed to. And sometimes they're doing it for in-state investors who are then in that weird spot where they live in Hamilton County and they own some properties up here. And so they've got a real estate agent up here who goes around and manages their properties. And that's the only donut hole that we're really looking at here, is those investors that live downstate or outside of the Northeast Ohio area that have property managers, and we're simply asking them to list that person. Through the chair, would it be the advice of ACAR that realtors want to do? Would you advise your membership to be agents in charge or to be property managers for in-state investors outside of the area?
No, and that's why we would like them to be explicitly removed from the proposal.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chair, I think it's already illegal for an agent to be a property manager for out-of-state investors. That's just Ohio Revised Code, and we can dig up the number. It's somewhere. And locally, property owners would list themselves anyway. You would be your own agent in charge. Whether you're an agent, an investor, or whatever, as long as you live in the area, you're your own agent. And so that only leaves the scenario where we've got people downstate that are investing in Cleveland property that we have to figure out who we're going to call when there's a problem with that unit. And through the chair to the director, we have reassurances that that person must actually volunteer themselves to be this person. We're just telling those downstate investors, find someone that agrees to be your property manager. And I would agree through the chair with you that I would never encourage a real estate agent to do that. It's not their job. I think this actually creates good delineation for those agents to understand. If you're the agent for the buyer, all you have to do is tell the buyer, hey, by the way, have an agent because you don't live here. Have somebody lined up that they're going to be able to list as the local person to contact when the gutter falls off.
Mr. Harsh, Mr. Harrison, by law, an agent cannot manage a property. The only one that can is a broker.
Correct.
Okay? There are many people, agents as well as common folks, everyone, managing property. It's illegal. It can only be done through the brokerage company, only through the brokerage.
Correct.
Okay? So if this agent in charge thing would have to be approved, if it's going to be done, it shouldn't be, but it would have to be approved by the brokerage. Individual agents cannot do that. We have hundreds of people out there right now managing properties that are doing it illegally, and they're doing it for local people, and they're doing it for people from other areas as well.
Agreed. And through the chair, those people are making it harder for our legitimate brokers who are doing good work. I know local brokers who are fantastic. I would refer people to them all day if I did referrals. I don't. But there are people that are following the rules and they're doing wonderful work, and their properties are some of the best managed properties in town because they're local brokers, they understand the laws, and they know how to do their job. But I just want to clarify that state law already requires property managers for out-of-state investors. We're just aligning Cleveland with that. We're just saying, okay, then go ahead and let us know who that person is on the rental registry. Tell us who your in-state person is. And if you're outside of Cuyahoga, give us somebody local that we can talk to reach you if you become unreachable in, I don't know, Guernsey County. Through the chair, I have a lot of sympathies with the concerns about point of sale, and this is where I fall into a lot of alignment with your concerns. Through the chair to the realtors here. When a buyer is looking to purchase a home and a seller is looking to sell, let's just do an arm's length transaction for argument's sake. Which point in that process would a point of sale be brought up to the seller and the buyer? When would the agents introduce this conversation, and how would that work functionally in the market when somebody says, I want to sell my house, but it's an old lady that never updated her, I don't know, a crack in her foundation, say something somewhat severe that's been leaking and she's just been managing it for years, but it's an expensive build. At what point would the realtors bring that conversation to light for the seller and potential buyers?
From the realtors.
At the point of time that you go through to have the Councilman Chairman, at the point of time where you take the listing, you're basically walking through the house. Even before you make a determination of what you're going to list it for, you inspect the property. And you also tell them, whatever community it might be, that there's a point of sale law. And the inspection has to be done. So you tell them up front. Now, they don't always agree with it. They may fight it. They may delay it. But the realtors, I would say 98% of the time, are going to say, let's do the point of sale immediately. So when they have a buyer for the property, the buyer is aware what the violations are.
Okay. So through the chair, so the conversation about the point of sale has to happen up front before putting the house on the market can even happen, would be the...
Mr. Chairman, Councilman, Mr. Chairman, it should.
It should.
Does it? Not always, it should.
But if the city is doing point of sale inspections and your agent for the seller, and you say, look, there's a new point of sale, we should get this inspection done up front, through the chair, would the results of that inspection affect the sales price of the house?
Yes. As will the private inspection. Besides the point of sale inspection, and they're usually not that good, to be honest with you. The buyers will have their own inspector, a private inspector, and
Right.
we encourage that as realtors, that there be a private inspection in the house. It's a full detailed list of what that inspector sees at that point in time. Okay, that is presented to the buyer. The buyer then makes their decision based upon what those inspections say. That could adjust the price, usually downward, not upward.
Right.
When I'm working with a buyer or investor or anybody, if they're looking at a home in a point of sale community, the first thing I do is there's a supplement section on the multiple listing service. I look for the supplement. Is the point of sale there? That's the first thing I send over. Here's what you're going to be dealing with. You know, nothing else really matters until you see that and know what you're getting yourself into. If you agree to that, then maybe we can decide to put in an offer. But that's kind of the go no go part. If you're in those point of sale communities and it's not done yet, do you want to go through that? Now you're going through getting an offer in, having it accepted, going down that inspection with the city, and then deciding, do I want to take this on? So, it's a drawn out, it can be a drawn out process.
Right. And Mr. Chair, that is like my big concern about the point of sale. It can slow down transfers. When we know how many vacant buildings in Cleveland, especially residential. We have good investors. We have responsible people, and we're not trying to tax them. We're not trying to make life harder for them. I understand that there are a lot of bad actors, and we are trying to figure that out. And I think we all agree that getting the bad actors, they either become good actors, I suppose, in a perfect world, or to decide that they don't want to be involved anymore would be the ideal outcome. But we can't, I'd like to pick a good analogy here. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? And we can't, what's bad for the goose is bad for the gander. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. What we're doing to try to stamp down bad flipping could also have adverse effects on good quality transfers that help people fix houses. And if that happens, then the whole thing backfires. And we run a risk of having a severe problem on our hands if we chase out the good actors. Because now they have to assume all this liability up front instead of being able to pace themselves for years and do the types of good work over time. So I'm done. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming in. Really appreciate it. That's all.
All right, Director, did you have anything to add? Mr. Davis? Awesome. Nothing?
Just appreciate them being here.
Mr. Chair, if I would like the administration to respond to that point of sale comment. Oh, I thought she said she didn't want to.
Oh, no, I'm good. My whole presentation.
Yeah, okay.
You want to add anything,
Through the chair? Yes. Yeah, we have a whole presentation really devoted just to that point. Yeah, but we've appreciated so much the conversation and our esteemed colleagues for being here. I'm very grateful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a number of cities around Cleveland that have a point of sales inspections that I know of. And Mr. Chairman, to the director, what are some of the cities? I know South Euclid is one of them. What are some of the cities that you have in Northeast Ohio that, I just want to compare what I have, what you may have. You may have an extension longer than what I have.
Through the chair to the councilman, South Euclid does not have point of sale, let's be clear. They have a vacant building ordinance that has a function that's like point of sale, which is what we're proposing here. It is not all transactions. Cleveland Heights has had a point of sale for many decades, so has Shaker Heights. And I believe these gentlemen addressed some of the smaller communities that did have it or watered it down or changed it or repealed it. The foreclosure crisis kind of did in some of those cities. There were some legal challenges too, but we know that it's defensible legally still. There really has been nothing that's overturned the concept. So yes, and I think those cities, which is quite different from a vacant building type of scenario that we're describing, require an escrow, and that can be a very big barrier and result in a much decreased sale price, because if you have to put up $95,000 as escrow, that's money that you can't spend fixing it right now. You'll have to draw down on your escrow. It can be a barrier. We don't have that requirement here.
And that's the difference, Mr. Chairman, to the director, is removing that barrier and then allowing, for clarification, Mr. Chairman, to the director, to give time to make, as long as they're making progress in terms of fixing the property. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman, to the director?
Through the chairman to the councilman, yes, yes. It's a pretty low barrier. We're not requesting escrow. We just want to inspect the house to see what's the matter with it and then ask that it become code compliant.
And Mr. Chairman, I heard Mr. Shockley. I'm glad that the Realtors Association is here. Talk about regulations, and was pretty assertive in the proposition of it and how it could negatively impact our market space. And I'm not a fan of adding any new regulations or rules or laws unless you have something that's totally broken and out of hand. I live in the city of Cleveland, and I've lived in the Lee and Harvard area all my life. We have never seen it this bad. We have never seen the entire east side obliterated. It's like as if someone had came in and started doing a bombing campaign in the east side, so much just so that we invested over 150 to 200 million in demolition cost. The financial institutions haven't come in and accepted responsibility for their role in this process. The financial institutions and realtors and associations and organizations who have been a part of redlining in the African American community hasn't come up and played any significant role in the marketplace. And when you look at some areas in the east side of the city of Cleveland, it's just like you made a statement about our commercial corridor. It's downright depressing. Who wants to come and move in the neighborhood? That looks depressing. Where you live in a nice house and then right across the street from you is a property that's fallen all down. You talked about some of the commercial corridor. I have a property as a prime example, 3 of them. When we talked about this at the table last week, where the roof is caving in. And it's been like that now for 30-some years. And then we have another property where the owner will not, just refuses to sell the property. And it's actually literally falling apart. and he refuses to sell the property. I don't know why he holds on to the property, but he's had a number of people who want to come there, and we're talking about the old Earl Shy at Lee and Miles. You see it, all the bricks falling all down. Now they've had to erect a fence around it. Our building and housing department has been horrible. Horrible. The worst department ever. I have no respect for it, given the fact that our housing department has fallen apart. So when we talked about the judge that was here sitting here at the table, and all this is not your fault, part of it is self-inflicted. To have 107 inspectors, to have health inspectors, and to have people who have a responsibility to work, to only have, when you divide those numbers down, to have maybe 70 inspections per inspector that make it to the court, there's some accountability, of course, that has to function on our side of the hall. And so when I see you guys sitting here at the table, you know, I would love to see an ongoing relationship. You know, how do we have and how do we improve Cleveland's marketplace? How do we do business in the city of Cleveland where we can get the kind of investment here in our neighborhood and moving our community forward? How do we have the best building and housing department? And this is not to say anything negative towards the new director or the new administration. They're just trying to get a hand around a dismal department that has been non-existent for the last 30-some years. And if I had my way, I'd obliterate the whole entire department, start all over. And at the end of the day, this is just how frustrated our citizens are in the Lee Harbor Ward 1 area when we have homeowners who are over there who committed themselves to the neighborhood, and we have houses falling down. They're calling the housing department. Nothing seems to happen. We have abandonment everywhere. The entire east side of the city of Cleveland is horrible. And then I come here and I talk about, just like you said, Mr. Lynch, you give a list and you ask, where is it at? Why haven't you done anything? We got people out there who, healthy homes, out there trying to help the building and housing department to do further inspections. And we've had a number of those kind of activities in the city of Cleveland, not just now, but in the past, where we had other stakeholders involved with how do we improve Cleveland's housing stock. If we don't get serious right now in both the private industry as well as on the public side and having some level of partnership, we won't be able to improve the Cleveland's market space. And if we're going to get serious about how we move our city forward, we need to have a progressive plan. And that plan means, how do we secure and strengthen our existing housing stock? How do we build new homes? Not in just targeted neighborhoods, picking political winners and losers like what has been done in the past, but talking about how we invest in all of the city of Cleveland, in all communities. How do we get our financial institutions engaged and involved in the process of how we move the city of Cleveland forward? Because you're right. The city of Cleveland is at a space right now where speculators are looking in our market space. And in my neighborhood right now, we're seeing LLCs come in, Mr. Chairman, to the director, and they're speculating all over the place. And they're picking up properties. And I was at a property, Mr. Chairman, to the director, 4101 East 151st Street. I hope you're writing it down. I'm going to say it one more time. 4101 East 151st Street. And on that street, the older lady who's a property owner, keep her house really nice. She says, you know, this person seems like they've broken into the property. There's debris everywhere. I'm not sure if he owns the property or not. So we looked it up and we saw LLC company. So now what we're starting to see is a number of LLC companies come in. They're fixing up the properties, putting a nice lipstick campaign on these properties, and then they're trying to do whatever they do, but these properties are vacant and people are breaking in them, they're living in them, and it seems in a period that that was the case here. Yep. When I knocked on the door, the young man came to the door. He said his name. I said, young man, are you the owner? And he seemed to be confused. He says, well, who are you? And I gave him my card. And I also offered him a job. And I told him, if you could please clean up this mess that's around here because the neighbors are complaining. He then told me his mother rented the property for him. But it didn't look like it was a rented property. And why I said that, Mr. Chairman, to the director, because the door was broken open on the side. You can see the damage that was done on that side end of the door. So I'm saying to you guys here, how do we develop that partnership? How do we improve the conditions of the city of Cleveland? And I believe, Mr. Chairman, to the director, that our city can really move fast and move forward on 2 levels. We can improve our residential neighborhoods and yet at the same time get investments into our corridors to improve our commercial corridors at the same time. But we can't do that, Mr. Chairman, if we don't have a true partnership with the corporate communities. And Mr. Chairman, most of my issues, I think Chris Harsh touched on it to kind of highlight it, and I think the director was eloquent in her comments in terms of knowing the gentleman here at the table and having the discussion and answering the questions. And it appears to me that what she's saying, and you can comment, seems to be reasonable to me, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Actually, you were right on time with your timer. You and Chris Harsh, y'all staying on time today. So I'll allow for Mr. Valerino, if he would like to make a brief response to your question about how you all can work together.
We would absolutely embrace working together. That's why we're here. That's really the purpose of our organization, to represent, yes, our members, but to help in a collaborative way to work together to address and solve these challenges that we have here. And I think I alluded to that at the outset, that we have some real challenges here that we all see and that we all agree on. We just differ on how to address them. The challenges that you describe sound like enforcement challenges to me. They don't sound like new legislation challenges or new legislation is needed. I also am very concerned about the lead-safe ordinance and making sure that we're able to follow through on our commitment to that. So I serve on Lead-Safe Cleveland steering committee, and it's a cause that I'm very passionate about and something that I've seen as well. And I'm really concerned that new resources required would pull resources away from that effort and harm that effort, because we still have to see that through. Well, that work isn't done. The state of emergency that you have there has not been resolved yet, and we would like to see that through as well.
Thank you. And I'll let Mr. Councilman Lynch wrap us up on the response.
Mr. Jones, Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mike. We'd be more than happy to do that. And it's not just the realtors you should have involved. The banking community should be involved. There should be some participation from the CDCs. We welcome that opportunity. We're all on the same page. There's just a different direction that's been taken on this. And we'd like to see that we be all on the same page and get it done and work cooperatively together. As far as the point of sale, I'm a director of the National Association of Realtors and the State Association as well. I can tell you that Cleveland, Ohio, are basically our eastern suburbs. You want to know where the communities were. Eastern suburbs have the point of sale. Virtually, this is an oasis throughout the country. Nobody else has point of sale. We have it. Is it working? Well, you saw the cities that are making changes already because it hasn't worked. The city of Garfield Heights went on their own and eliminated it, and they found that their housing values went up. Same thing with Maple Heights. They went up. Same thing with Euclid. They went up because they let people follow the normal market using their own inspectors and taking care of the problem. Point of sale is not the solution.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Lynch. All right. Thank you to our friends from ACAR. We thank you for your comments, your questions, your concerns today. Thank you for the dialogue. We truly appreciate it. Thank you. Absolutely. All right. Absolutely not. All right. We're going to turn it over to Director Martin and her team. Mr. Vanover, come on back up here.
We also have Antoinette Allen, our administrative manager.
Antoinette Allen, come on up here.
We also have Karen Detmer, our lead safe manager. So
Would you like Karen
Karen's
to come up?
welcome to come up if she'd like to opine on lead safe, because we have a lot to say there. So I'm going to fly through this
Okay.
presentation because
Don't
I
fly
know
too
that
fast
and Mr. Vanover will lean back in his chair so I can see.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to recap, who's here? Okay, so Thomas Vanover, CBO. Colleen Majeski, Assistant Director. Austin, who has left the table, but from the Mayor's Office, Austin Davis. Dave Roberts, our Chief of Code Enforcement Law, and Karen Dittmer, our Lead Safe Manager, and Antoinette Allen, our Administrative Manager. So you got the whole team. And why are we here? I mean, obviously we're here because we all know there's a tremendous problem vexing neighborhoods. We have had these speculators, these robber barons coming from afar, buying our stock because why? It's too easy to own vacant property in Cleveland. It's too easy to get away with it, and that has to stop. So we need a new game plan, and we believe we have one. So you all know what it's about. But what did we amend? And I think that's really critical here, is to talk about what's changed from the original iteration of this ordinance. And obviously, this indemnification clause for local agents in charge, explicitly letting them know you have standing to go after that owner for any expenses that you end up incurring as a result of their lack of maintenance of a property. You know about the strengthened ability to abate tall grass and weeds, and I know that's most welcome for most of you. We're all tired of the 8-foot tall grass. Revise the search warrant process to clarify the presumption that, of course, we're going to seek consent before pursuing a search warrant, which we always have, we will always do. Also, an impact study 2 years after the passage of the ordinance to show the results in the community. This is going to be conducted by a third party. So we would hire someone to study, what's been the impact to neighborhoods? Has it chilled the housing market? Has it, in fact, improved neighborhoods? That's what's to be addressed. There's also some changes related to land reutilization corporations, because we did get some feedback from our land bank. There were some issues there that they wanted to be more fleshed out as it pertained to land banks. So such as, does a land bank have to register all of its vacant land? That would be oppressive and not really useful. And the answer is no, that we're not asking for that. It eliminates the escrow requirement for vacant properties. As you know, there's only inspections on 1 to 3 family vacant parcels, residential parcels. It does not apply to commercial and industrial. There is a fee waiver for land banks and governments holding vacant property, such as things that the land bank is holding in anticipation of demolition. It reduces the residential unit registration fee to $70 to match the rental registration fee. We felt this was fair. It's also easier for us to administer and less of a reason somebody might say, well, I'll just register it as a rental because it's cheaper. We wanted it to be the same. It requires the director to provide extensions to the 6-month window to complete repairs as long as there's demonstrated progress on renovations. It eliminates a 10% administrative fee on bonds for vacant non-residential properties, which was in the original iteration of this, and no bond requirement for vacant non-residential properties that don't have code violations, board ups, or those that are actively being rehabbed. So let's get down to brass tacks. How many properties does this affect? So properties that will require pre-transfer inspection have to be vacant at the time of transfer and are residential properties containing 1 to 3 units. In Cleveland, 6,962 structures out of the 117,564 total structures in our city meet the criteria above. Typically between 1,200 and 1,400 of those are sold every year. That's 6% of the total vacant properties in the city that this would apply to. So further, and you've seen this before, so we won't belabor it, but we know from our property survey, which as an aside is the reason there were fewer court filings last year. We were out surveying all 167,000 parcels in the city of Cleveland. So we were quite busy. And that explains, the judge's concern about the drop. There won't be a drop this year. And so we know that vacant parcels represent most of the Ds and Fs in this city. So what we're asking with vacant properties with the registry is that the vacant properties are kept secure and weather tight with basic upkeep. And the city may inspect as needed based on condition, regardless of the type of property it is. The vacant 1 to 3 family homes are required to be inspected within a year of the expected transfer, which is an interior and exterior inspection focusing on life, health, and safety issues. And there's no additional charge for that inspection. So who is impacted and who's not impacted here? Individuals who own a second home that they don't rent out and would like to transfer. So you have a family, estate property, you're trying to sell it. Who's not impacted? People living in their own homes. Individuals who own second properties used for non-residential purposes, like a garage where they're storing vehicles. Individuals who own vacant commercial and industrial buildings, they're not getting inspected. Okay, so inspections and how it works. When the owner is ready to sell, they'll need an inspection for a 1 to 3 family home. That inspection is valid for 1 year. There's no additional charge for it. If the inspection reveals any code violations, the person who buys or receives the property will learn about them before they decide to purchase the property, and the new owner will have 6 months from purchase to remedy the code violations with extensions granted for progress. So if we look at the actual impact, what impact would it have on a typical home buyer? Typically, as stated by our realtor colleagues, a person just searching for a home will bring in their own home inspector before the purchase and negotiates the price based on the property's condition. The city inspections probably would add no information to that exchange. For a responsible homeowner, they don't leave the property they own in poor condition. They fix up their property. The city requirement to correct violations would not change their behavior at all. For a corporate purchaser, less interested in property condition, and typically does not inspect prior to purchase. They buy their properties as is. With Residents First, these LLCs will finally be required to fix up their vacant homes instead of flipping them again and again. What about people who inherit property that may be disinvested? Purchasers will receive an inspection result about the condition of the property, and if the purchaser is an LLC, they typically seek bargains and anticipate distress condition. This will require them to bring the home up to code. Responsible purchasers deserve to know the condition of the home and what's required to fix it. Sadly, many buyers find themselves in over their head. And I think we saw this very acutely during the pandemic when we had such low supply and such demand for real estate that many home buyers were waiving inspection contingencies. And I think many of them today are probably waking up with a bit of a hangover, realizing they overpaid for something that needed significant repair. So accurate information does not hurt anyone's equity in a property. What hurts is poor maintenance. So how many inspections do we think are going to result each year as a result of this ordinance? 1,200 to 1,400 based on our research of the prior years. So that would be an average of 5 to 6 pre-sale inspections per working day. So we are anticipating needing somewhere between 5 and 7 inspectors for a vacant inspection unit. And let me be the first to apologize to Councilman Joe Jones. I got clarification on my numbers, and I want to provide them to you. So when I was giving you the 100 figure, that was the entire Division of Code Enforcement. There's 95 people over there. So what do we have on the books right now? We have 61 inspectors on our books. We have 14 open positions. You know, we have some outstanding offers. We believe we're going to fill up those 14, and we would told you before we'd like to add about 15 more.
So clarification, Mr. Chairman, you said how many inspectors do you have currently?
61.
61 inspectors, not 100.
We have 95 people in the Division of Code Enforcement. That was what I was that number I was throwing out that was on the top of my head. That was not correct for inspectors. So I want to set that straight and apologize because obviously this is important, right? So we need to have the capacity to do this work. Do we think we will? Yes, I absolutely think we can do that. And one of the ways is the fact that we, are adding property maintenance inspectors. We see some robust interest now that we've corrected our union contracts, so we do feel good about that. So again, as with all of this, let's call it an iterative process. What we want you to pass today may not be the same ordinance we need 4 years from now. This is why we can come back and go back to the drawing board. This is also why we're saying in 2 years, let's revisit it. Let's talk about it. So we are actually proposing a sunset of the vacant building inspection requirement for 2 years. So we can all sit and assess it, and we can say, did it work? Did it fail? Do we want to do it again? And I think that's critical, because we do have to develop the trust that this works. We are worried about unintended consequences. I don't think those are going to happen, but we need to prove ourselves. And so we'll call it a proof of concept. We'll call it a pilot. We'll call it whatever you want, but we want the authority to go and do it because we feel it's the right thing. It's based on national best practices. It's based on my own experience of 10 plus years of enforcing something similar. So as a quick case study, we're going to talk about a house in Tremont that burned.
I'm trying to read some PTSD.
I had to do this, Councilman McCormick, because it's just such a perfect example. So this was a home that the original owners had when it caught fire, okay? They didn't repair it. Instead, they sold it to an out-of-state investor instead of repairing it, right? Making it someone else's problem.
Yeah.
So we've been chasing this woman from California in through the court system, not being able to get her in court for a long time, well over a year. So what would have happened if Residents First had been the law in 2020 when this thing burned? The property would have been required to be registered as a vacant building. The buyer from California would have had to assume the violations, be required to make repairs within 6 months of purchase. The buyer would have been required to address the hazards and public safety issues within 10 days. So, because the owner is out of state, a local agent in charge would have had to be appointed, somebody we could have actually physically gotten into court, unlike this woman from California. Inspectors would issue civil tickets if the repairs were not started within 6 months, or they didn't do the life, health, and safety stuff in the first 10 days, and they would have either had to pay that, the owner would have had to pay that, or it would be attached to the property tax bill.
On the point, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What about homeowners insurance? In this particular instance, did they have homeowners insurance?
Through the chair to the councilman, I don't believe they did.
And then,
Which is a
Mr.
big
Chairman,
problem.
then the question would be, shouldn't we add something to our policy that makes these people have insurance on these properties?
Director.
Do you want to opine?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that,
Microphone.
Got to pull it up.
Mr. Chairman.
Hit the button. Keep pressing.
Stop and go.
There you go.
All right, I apologize. So, Mr. Chairman, to the councilman, I think there's a lot of issues around that, and that is a major problem, is we have many properties, especially in the neighborhoods, where they couldn't get insurance for a long time. So I think there's equity issues. I think there may also be legal issues in that requirement. It's not something, there's been a lot of talk about all the barriers to investment. That's another one that hasn't been considered as part of this legislation. I think it's something that we should definitely have a conversation about, but it's not part of this package.
And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate what you're saying, and I would love to sit down and understand that a little bit better. But when I refinanced my house, I had to have insurance. So it's the marketplace already. You have to have insurance if you own property, and that will be one of the reasons why in my colleague's ward this would have been fixed already, and we don't have the capacity here in the city of Cleveland to make them fix it, and that's the reason why we're sitting here at the table to try to figure out what kind of tools we need to be able to do that. So I need to have a little bit more understanding, Mr. Chairman, from the director why we couldn't have that as a part of this whole proposition, because it's already in the market space.
Councilman Jones, you asked for a point, and we're going beyond the point of discussion. So I will put you on the list, and then you can ask that. We can go into that a little more.
No, I was complete, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Not inspector.
Yes, it's fine.
Director. I called her inspector. I'm
It's
sorry.
all running together.
All
It's fine. So what's the point? And why do we need these? I mean, let's face it. Vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated properties reduce the value of surrounding properties. In fact, within 500 feet by almost 10%. You're losing value in the neighborhood. And you know that people lose confidence in a neighborhood that's littered with vacant properties. Yeah. So, and they're often charged higher insurance premiums, to your point, Councilman. And as a former property casualty insurance agent, I totally agree with you. I think everyone, of course, should have property casualty insurance. It's a little easier said than done in some cases. So we're leaving our homeowners with less equity because of the proximity of these properties. So when there's vacancy and blight on a street, everyone pays. Responsible property owners lose value. Home buyers look elsewhere for a home. Crime increases in areas with high vacancy. Residents want and expect their city to do something to help. By requiring the registration of all vacant buildings, identifying a local agent in charge, and expecting 1 to 3 family vacant parcels inside and out, the city can begin helping neighborhoods restore vitality, increase confidence in the housing market. So some myths and facts. Myth: this requirement will drive responsible investors out of the market. Fact: responsible investors care about the condition of their properties and will appreciate knowing the city's requirements for code compliance. Myth: home buyers will look elsewhere. Fact: responsible home buyers will appreciate knowing the property condition and can make an educated decision about purchasing it based on their resources and ability to make needed repairs. Myth: this hurts Cleveland residents who inherit family homes. Fact: this ensures that long disinvested properties will finally be brought up to code. Selling grandma's distressed home will cost the seller $70 to register. The buyer will be the one making the repairs. So that concludes the formal remarks, and obviously we're here for the duration to answer any questions anyone has, and we appreciate your support.
All right. Okay, I got you. Thank you. Okay, I got you. Thank you, Director. Thank you for the additional presentation this morning. I know we've been having a lot of discussion around the ordinance that has been presented, and have colleagues lined up to ask further questions. We're going to go to Councilwoman House Jones, McCormack, and then Harsh, and then Jones.
Good morning, or it's still morning. Yeah, so through the chair, to the director and the team, good morning. I really just have like 2 questions for the moment. The first one is listening to our housing court judge, there are some questions that I have asked. So when this was being put together, was there any communication with our housing court team?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I believe that our chief inspector may have had some conversations with his former boss, but I will defer to him on that.
Yes, to the chair, through the chair to the councilwoman. Yes, we talked to her about it. I will not say she was involved early on when I still worked for her last year. I don't think she was consulted. But
So at what point, because, we're hearing 2 different staff.
Right.
Their team is saying, do you see what I'm saying? Like, this, 2 things came, she just was here and talked about really not having a connection to what is being proposed today. And then you're saying, yes, she was. Something is not
I think
right.
I think she wouldn't disagree that we briefed her on it in about September. So about when it was ready. So there was, I think, a year-long process prior to that. She was not invited to that. But when we did have it, we took it to her so she could have input on it before it moved forward in front of you.
So being briefed on it, did they give any suggestion through the chair to the team? Did the housing court team give some suggestions that were included?
I will say this. Judge Scott is constantly, in her passion for code enforcement, discussing it with me. She didn't sit down and say...
Not her. I'm just saying, because I don't expect her, but whoever is the policy team. I'm saying as we were talking about, these processes were informed, because that to me, I will say, is it seems to be a little bit of not alignment, thinking through if this is able to be successfully passed, what does full implementation and integration look like in a core system? I'm saying, did we do that work? Has that work been done to even do the integration portion of we have many things on books, but that doesn't mean it is effectively and efficiently executed.
Yes, I think I hear what you're saying, which is that, and that's why Judge Scott's been monitoring it, because as she said today, if it goes into effect, and the day it goes into effect, she needs to be ready. The clerk's office needs to understand the paperwork has to be there. Her staff has to have the policies in place to address these new issues. And so we need to keep her apprised, and I work closely with her on that.
Maybe through the chair to the team. Okay, so this is a request. This is a request. I think what we need to do is actually have some time to what does actually full integration look like? What is the time that's needed to do it? How much does it cost to do? I mean, somebody got to do that somewhere. It's not like, and I understand we have this process many times in government. We pass stuff and be like, oh, go figure it out. We are really, I hopefully we have all come to the realization that that's probably not the best way to do government. While we are all separate branches of government, we still are interconnected to one another and have to be working so things can be successfully executed, because our execution is just not where it needs to be all around. It's not, I'm going to say the court, it's not the executive team, it's the legislative. Like, we all have to be in sync with one another for these things to work. And again, and just listening to the earlier conversation, it seems to be a disconnect. So I hope that we can have some at least project planning, because from what I'm hearing, we are still trying to fix things with the lead safe stuff. Is that correct? From the chair to the table, is that correct? There are still some implementation issues or missed things regarding lead safety stuff.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, Lead Safe is a work in progress. Lead Safe was launched during the height of the pandemic. So one of the things that we're intending to do this year is stand up a 1 to 3 family lead compliance unit. So we have many certified lead risk assessors on staff. We have lots of ideas. So yes, lead's a heavy lift because many houses are disinvested and they need a little bit more hand-holding to get to that standard. So true, and I believe A.D. Majeski may have some comments about your other question.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, one thing we did do, and I don't disagree with your comment that perhaps we could have been more collaborative with the courts, but one thing we did do is Carl Kennenberg, the chief magistrate, was here before.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I can't hear the
Can you not
distinguished
hear?
lady.
Sorry, we did go to a conference in, when was that? Last fall or early summer, and it was in Memphis, and we brought one of the housing court magistrates with us. We involved the police. We had one of the commanders there with us. We had Dave Roberts there from law. So we carefully thought and brought participants that we could work and collaborate on the nation's best practices for dealing with code enforcement. And that was the academy we went to. So we did take the time early on to try and integrate members from the court, which was Carl Kennenberg, Dave Roberts, Mo Brown from Commanders, and we did make that effort. I don't disagree that we could always do better, but that was one of the first steps we did when we were going to this national conference to get best practices from there.
Okay. Bear in mind, through the chair to the councilwoman, we're asking for a 6-month delay in vacant building enforcement. So we would not anticipate starting that for 6 months after passage. So that gives us plenty of time to speak with the court. So I'm not sure that it would have been entirely appropriate to ask Judge Scott to come to our planning meetings about the ordinance. We were meeting over the last year, but we certainly, including Carl Kennenberg in our trip to Memphis with Schema that we got a scholarship for, was an effort to really be very collaborative with the court.
Yeah, and again, just through the chair to the director and team, it was not to say to be totally integrated. The thought is just on a process mapping. Like I think regardless of whatever decisions are being made, we really need to be a little bit more intentional to think about how it's going to work, even as we are going into budget hearings, right? Are there some financial implications to this? Not just on the people side, right? But in infrastructure, IT, things of that nature. Where are those resources coming from? Have we had the conversations to ensure that we are, even with the 6 months delay, if you don't have the money to invest in the IT infrastructure, then it's not going to work. So those are the types of things that, regardless of the content, some of the just the foundational things should be worked out. And like I said, in listening to this conversation, it doesn't seem like those conversations have been happening to the point where I think everyone is comfortable. I will say that. And that comfort is, no one likes to change, so I don't know if comfort is even a realistic goal. So the other thing I will say, through the chair, to the director, when we talk about this amendment regarding the indemnification of the local agent, and I know we had this conversation about our local agents, property managers, where does the property manager fit into this? And the reason why I'm asking this question, because I am hearing that at times you have property owners who have these local property managers that they give money to, and then lo and behold, they are not doing the stuff that they actually got the money for. So how is that? I want to verify, are those instances actually happening from what is being reported, that property owners are giving someone, a property manager, I don't know what the titles are, money that they are then just taking and not doing what they were supposed to do with it? So that's the first part. And then the second part is, and what we are proposing, are we capturing that to hold people accountable, or would that just be a totally separate ordinance, criminal, like you're just stealing some money or something like that, if I'm making sense with what my ask is?
Chairman, to the councilwoman, thank you. That's a great point. One of the things when ACAR was up here is there was a statement made, I believe, by Mr. Starkey. I could be wrong. And the exact quote was that there are people currently acting as property managers illegally, right? And my question is, who are they? Tell us. The statement was made from the realtors that there are illegal property managers. Give me all their names and we'll report them. The problem is we don't have their names. Nobody has their names. And so they're acting illegally. And your scenario absolutely is happening. We're hearing from the property managers, the illegal property managers that are, nobody knows who they are. We're hearing from them that our owner's not funding this, so they won't let us do that, or they're not giving us the money to do that. We're also hearing for the owners, no, I paid so-and-so. He's my property manager. He's my custodian. He's all of those things. One of the things the local agent in charge is, it fixes ACAR's problem that they presented at the table, that we have people illegally managing properties. Local agent in charge allows us to identify out-of-town owners, and we can do that in paper. We have some incredible IT folks that can scrape the county's website, and we can do our research. We can find out who are the out-of-town LLCs, look to see if they have a local agent in charge, and then follow up to make sure that the local agent in charge is doing those things. One, they're legally allowed to do that, and secondly, that they are doing that thing, and if they don't do that thing, then we can hold them accountable. So if they're taking the money and not doing the work, we hold them accountable, and the indemnification clause that is in here, if one is taking money to do something and then the city prosecutes that person, the indemnification's out the window. If you're getting paid to do something that you don't do, you don't get indemnified anymore, and that's the entire process. So it actually fixes this concern that ACAR has completely.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Through the chair, could we please kindly delegalize the word indemnify. Could we put that in different language, layman's terms, what that means for people following along at home? It's a very confusing legal term.
Through the chair to the councilman, make whole. It's a sacred term in insurance. It's where you make someone whole. You make them complete. So if I've had to pay this money on your behalf, I need to be made whole. You've got to pay me back. I've had to pay $1,500 because you didn't do what you're supposed to do. You got to pay me the $1,500 back.
So the proposal through the city is to indemnify the local agent in charge against the property owner.
It provides, in Austin here, could probably opine better than I about how one would go about exercising that right.
Thank you, Chair. Through the chair to the council person, there's when you apply to the city for your rental registry, you have to, as an owner, sign your name saying I own this, and identify your local agent in charge, who also has to sign that form. On that form, we will say that if we, as the city, come after the local agent in charge for whatever violation, that local agent in charge will get made whole by the owner. This is indemnification is a legal term, but yeah, that's the made whole element. If we're going after, the local agent in charge, who we expect to be the property manager, they'll have what's called a private right of action, or they can go to the courts and be like, hey, the owner, my boss, owes me money. The city says that. The city made them sign a piece of paper that says they owe me money if I have to pay the city money. So, made whole.
Thank you. It's important that we explain this in non-fancy words.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councilman. Kerry McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the time today and for everyone that came here today. And I'll just say, Mr. Sharkey took a pain in my behind into a beautiful family home. So I do want to acknowledge that. I'm jealous every day when I walk my dogs by it. So an example of a good investor in the city, in homeowner in the city of Cleveland. Chair, I just a couple quick comments and questions. Number one, I really appreciate the director bringing out that example in Tremont, because I really do believe that speaks to a frustration in the community, and the residents that I represent in that neighborhood can't understand why nothing is happening.
Of course not.
To that property, right? And who could, right? We've been dealing with this from the mayor's chief of staff. I've talked to the mayor about it, right, all the way down on this issue because of how egregious it is. So I really appreciate you kind of highlighting that as a problem property, and I'm happy to talk to my colleagues about that property. And as I've said, I used it in the last hearing, a problem property is always a problem property. It is kind of really escalated because in Tremont, my houses are 3 to 5 feet away from each other. It's a dense urban neighborhood. It's an older neighborhood. It doesn't have big driveways and separations. So when you got a home that's burnt out next to you, it is next to you. You could reach out of your kitchen window and probably touch it. So I really do appreciate you highlighting that issue and whatever tools that we can bring on to hold that out-of-state landlord accountable, slum landlord accountable for wreaking havoc on a neighborhood. And I would say those neighbors are very patient, quite frankly. I don't know that I would have that patience if I were living next to that house. So I want to thank you for highlighting that example. And I do want to just kind of note up front too, and I think it deserves to be said, that the private market has not worked in Cleveland, and intentionally in certain neighborhoods, and I'm not going to get into the history of systemic racism and redlining. We've talked about that extensively, but intentionally has not worked in certain neighborhoods, which is a big reason of why we're here today. I think we need to say that every time we have these conversations in this context. So just a couple questions, and one last comment, and then 2 questions. The other comment I want to make is about the lead work, and I feel obligated to say this because I was involved in that conversation from the very beginning. Somehow there's rhetoric that we're supposed to be done with that. Best case scenario when we started those conversations around the new ordinance was 10 years. Best case scenario. The best models out there on achieving a lead-safe situation, not to mention throwing in the pandemic and the inability to inspect homes. I'm not saying things have not gone wrong with that process. I'm sure there's many places where improvement can be made. The point, though, is that that was always understood to be a long-term commitment, always. In the best case scenarios, if everything went exactly as the way it should, that was always understood to be a decade-plus challenge for the city of Cleveland to get to lead safe. So I want to acknowledge that, because I'm hearing more and more, well, we're not done with lead safety yet, or I'm like, we were never supposed to be. That was always understood to be a long-term project in the best case scenarios, without a pandemic, without a change of administrations, without all this other stuff that's come in. That was always meant to be that, and everyone understood that from the beginning. Really, my question, Chair, to the director, on the point of sale conversation, can you define what a vacant home is? And the reason I ask, if Joe Biden asks me to be on his presidential ticket and I have to move to Washington, D.C., and I vacate my home and I'm no longer living in it, and I call Dave and I say, hey, I need you to sell my house because I'm going to go run with Joe Biden. My house is vacant. I've moved everything out of it. But is that considered a vacant structure? How do we define vacant?
Through the chair to the councilperson, I'll read the definition that's in the legislation.
Thank you. That's helpful.
I'll help. The director can comment on it. A vacant building or vacant property means a building that is not occupied by its owner, leasee, or other person in lawful possession, and at which substantially all lawful business operations or substantially all residential occupancy has ceased, or which is substantially devoid of content.
So through the chair, though, again, that could qualify what I just described. I mean, if I have to leave and pull all my stuff out of it, and I'm no longer in that house, is it is vacant, but it's not. Hasn't been sitting there for 5 years and causing neighborhood problems. It's not abandoned, right? Thank you. So how do we define that?
Through the chair to the councilman, well, we did define it. Yeah. And I think one slippery slope we can get into is trying to quantify the time on that. That becomes almost unenforceable. So what we want is something enforceable. Now, I would suspect when you're called to Biden to be the vice president nominee, and you move out and you take all of your things, if you had to get a vacant inspection before you sold your house, probably wouldn't reveal much of anything that a buyer would be concerned about. It would probably be very insubstantial in your case.
Right. So, but I guess I'm just trying to understand. How do we tackle that? Right. Like if people do get their jobs transfer them to another city, and they need to leave immediately, and then they call a real estate agent and they say, I need to sell my house. Right. It's not vacant in the same sense as the house in Tremont that has been sitting there for 4 years, truly vacant. So how do we parse that? Or is that a case-by-case basis? Through the chair.
So, Mr. Councilman, through the chair, empty is not vacant. We understand that. So what you do after you make the move to DC is what matters. Is it open to casual entry, right? So we do consistently, Dr. Kobe does a bunch of data crunching on when we get these numbers for how many vacant properties are there. Of course, it begins with the USPS list, which I apologize. I'm trying to talk loud without feeling like I'm yelling at people. But so of course the USPS vacancy list is a beginning, but it's also, have we boarded it up? Have the neighbors complained that there's casual entry? Is your grass high? Is your garbage piling up? So there's all of these things to make these determinations. The expectation as part of this process and as part of the vacant property registration as well as the inspection is to identify those that are vacant. And it's a moving number. It's a moving target. And anytime we have a moving target, it's an issue. But there's a lot of other indications of vacancy. And it's quite possible that, there is a property that sits empty for a year, for 2 years, and we are not made aware of it. Those aren't the ones we're concerned about.
Okay.
The ones we're concerned about are, because you still privately own that. Now, if you flip it to a corporate owner and it's not either registered as a rental or a vacant, well, then we start paying much closer attention to the condition of the property.
Okay. So, Chair, I'll just finish it up, and this has been really helpful. So, in addition to Mr. Davis's definition, in order to get on that list, you've got to tick some of those other boxes of USPS, or you're not just, I guess I'm trying to get to ensuring that that requirement does not apply to someone in good faith who just left, is selling the darn thing. Like, do you understand what I'm trying to get at here? Like, you have to meet other criteria of vacancy as just described in order to be on the list of the numbers the director provided.
No, that's a good question. I'm going to turn it over because I asked the same thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I'm just
if
trying to get my head around
one, I had that
Right.
roundabout yesterday with the director and staff, because those cases happen. You know, we have people in our communities who may work out of state, out of town for long periods of time, but may move to Texas and say, you know what, I'm going to stay here. And what happens at that point? So I'm going to turn to director, then we're going to go to manager Allen.
Through the chair to the councilman and everyone. Let's go back to your scenario.
I don't know why I chose Texas, though, but okay.
Yeah, why would you ever move
don't-
to Texas? Big bugs, heat, all those things. One example we talked about, Mr. Chairman, was the idea of someone going to a nursing home. Okay, maybe they can't go back to their house because they had to go into the nursing home. Chances are that's not going to meet our requirements because, first off, probably she's still got all of her stuff in there, and maybe the residents are trying to sell the house and then, you know, close that up and get her into the assisted living place where they have her. So that's not meeting the requirement. You know, so I think they're again, you know, the idea of reassessing this in 2 years, like, did it work? Did it have unintended consequences? Do we need to iterate it further? I think what we need to do, though, is be very cautious if we want to start getting into the weeds about, well, how long has it been vacant? It's going to be unenforceable for us. So whereas I don't think it's going to affect you when you're, you know, anticipating your move and all of this, and you know, you still got stuff there, and you're trying to sell it, but you're going to get the rest of your stuff out. I think you're on fine ground. I think really Vanover was clear about this. We're really going after, you know what we're going after. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we've got our hands full there.
So, Mr. Chairman, my line of questioning is in response to this idea of heavy bureaucratic new regulations on good actors. So it's just, my line of questioning is to ensure that we're talking about those vacant blighted properties that are plaguing our neighborhoods, not my example.
Right. I believe you had something.
Well, I think I would add through the chair to the council person, to underscore Sally's point, there's a degree of flexibility that's helpful at the end of the day to make sure that we're capturing the worst actors while understanding that substantially devoid of content doesn't include your scenario where you're selling your house or you're visiting once a month, you know, on your trip back from DC. Thanks for, you know, remembering us little people. That can't be substantially devoid of content. Content is still occurring in your home. I'd also add, if you know, it really did come to a scenario where this has been a well-maintained property but empty for 2 years, all we're asking is file a form with the city and pay $70 a year to let us know it's empty. That there's no real stick here. We're just keeping track of things on a vacant building registry. If that's your worst case scenario for a well-maintained home, we hope that's a reasonable compromise.
To the chair, to the council, Councilman Corman. Also, just to add for clarification, it is my understanding as a private owner, if I decide to sell my home, it's not considered vacant because then we will be extending the point of sale to all residents within the city of Cleveland. So it's my understanding, I'm a LLC, or I have 2 properties, and this vacant property is in Councilman Ward area. Is a vacant property. I don't live there. I live in Ward 8, but I'm going to sell that vacant property. That's a 1 dwelling unit, 1 to 3, that's in his area. Then that's when this legislation would apply. But as a private owner selling the property that I live in, because I'm getting ready to become president, does not, to me, it would not fit into that because that means now we got to extend it to all residents within the city of Cleveland, all private owners. And I don't think that's what we're going at.
Thank you.
For the point of sale.
Thank you, Chair. This has been clarifying. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, you're next on the list. You are. Councilman Harsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To follow up on that, though, the legislation says vacant at the time of transfer. And transfer happens through some magical dance between a title agency and the county recorder. They do the actual transfer. On that date, though, through the chair to the director, aren't all residential properties vacant at the point of transfer? The seller has moved out. The buyer hasn't moved in. Aren't they all, by this definition, functionally vacant?
Through the chair to the councilman, not always, actually.
I'm sure there are exceptions, but aren't the vast majority of all transfers vacant at the point of transfer?
Through the chair to the councilman, I can't say for sure. I'm assuming many of them are. And Austin, it sounds like.
Through the chair to the councilperson, could you point me to where it says at the time of transfer?
Page 5 of your presentation today.
That may just be some paraphrasing. I don't think we actually use that term in the language, but.
Properties that will
confusion.
require pre-transfer inspection are vacant at the time of transfer and are residential properties and contain 1 to 3 units.
Thank you.
So I guess this is my Mr. Chairman, the director, it seems like we're going to be really deciding when we want to enforce a vacant inspection because all properties are going to be vacant at the point of transfer. 90% of properties are going to be vacant at the point of transfer.
Through the chair to the councilman, I think that may be overthinking this a little bit more than you need to. I mean, seriously, vacant buildings are pretty obvious.
I mean, if it's overthinking now, what's it going to be when inspectors have to decide whether or not to enforce a vacancy survey, a vacancy inspection? We can do the overthinking now or we can do it later and ask the inspectors.
Director.
Through the chair to the councilman, your point's taken. So let's go back to the scenario of Councilman McCormick. Let's just rewind to his scenario of, I had to move to DC. I moved all my stuff already. I'm selling my house. So let's just go there and say, all right, Councilman McCormick, your house is languishing on the market. You know, you need to register it with the city. This wasn't like an immediate thing. Like, if Councilman McCormick is going to sell his house, chances are someone's going to snap it up immediately. It's never going to hit our radar, right? It's not sitting vacant. It's not vacant at all, really, except he's just moving across the country. You know, the idea here is even if it was vacant for a bit, he registered it, we did the inspection. What's terrible about that? It isn't going to be a point of sale.
Mr. Chair, the director, aren't we asking inspectors to make value judgments at that point? Because they won't know that that was Councilman McCormick and that he did a perfect job as a homeowner and that there's nothing to worry about inside that vacant house. The inspectors won't know that. We're asking them to make value judgments on whatever information they probably don't have access to decide whether or not to treat this as a vacant property that needs a point of sale. How do we do that?
Through the chair to the councilman, most of this would be handled at the level of the title company, right? So it becomes an issue where, let's say we send out notices to all the properties we believe are vacant, which is what we would do to enforce this, right? So we know there's 9,800 parcels in Cleveland, but we know that the small set of them is the 1 to 3 family, but all of those need to be registered under vacant buildings should you all pass this, right? So we're going to send notices and say, we believe you have a vacant building, you need to register it. So some of them won't. So what do we do there? We put an affidavit of fact. We record it against the title to say that we believe this is a vacant building. It's not in compliance. It flags the title. So when that person goes to transfer that property, it's going to trigger the title company to say, hey, there's a requirement here. You have to get this inspection.
And through the chair to the director, we can do that now. We can inspect the exterior conditions of a house while it's vacant right now without point of sale. We're allowed to do that. Correct.
So if I may respond, I think that there, in all the conversation, I think there gets, what's confusing is when the heavy lifting happens. You are 100% right that there are going to be properties that meet our definition and our requirements of vacant that get sold and don't get an inspection and the train keeps rolling. But the heavy lift and what we're really expecting all of our resources to go to is defining the properties that are vacant. Okay. Those are done through, it's done through the county records. It's done through, but this is important though, and I know that we're limited, but to get those to begin hand. Yeah. If it is registered at the time of transfer and you don't get it inspected, you are in violation. If it is vacant prior to that and we identify it as vacant, you will be cited for, they will be cited for not registering.
And let me jump back in there, because, Mr. Chair, the reason why I think the vacancy registration is so redundant and unnecessary is that there's two very good pieces of this, 365.02 and 367.12, which further clarify that the city transfers violation notices from seller to buyer. That there will be no loss in violation notices when a new person buys a house. All violations transfer with that property. And I believe it used to be that only condemnations did, because that hit a different criteria, and violations had to be reissued to the new owner of a property. And we are clearing that language up. We're also, with this legislation, requiring the certificates of disclosure be issued for all transfers. That would include a quitclaim. That would include a sheriff's sale. We're closing that loophole. So we're doing two things here, Mr. Chair. We're saying that the certificate of disclosure is irrelevant to the fact that the violation travels with the property, and we're saying a certificate of disclosure should be issued for all transfers. If that happens, then we already have violations on the house after it transfers. What do we need the point of sale for? We've already got the open violation. Through the chair to the director, I hate to spring this on you, and I'll give you all a few seconds to figure it out. How many open violations are there currently in the city of Cleveland?
On the point, Mr. Chairman, for clarification, at
I'm sorry, please,
36.01,
can I keep moving?
Just need to have clarification, Mr. Chairman, to follow Mr. Harsh. What page are we talking about, 36.01?
It's a bunch of pages. It's a 50-page piece of legislation.
We'll get the pages for you.
I see, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Through the chair to the councilman, the realtors are silently cheering in the background here. You're singing their tune.
They've all left.
Well, they're watching and they're singing, singing their tune, so I'm sure they're
But we have to
grateful
talk
you.
about this now.
Absolutely. What are we missing? All of the interior violations that we never see.
Correct. But how many open violations are there right now in the city of Cleveland?
Well, all I can say, I can't speak to open. What I can tell you is since 2018, we've issued 23,749 notices.
Since when?
Since 2018.
Okay,
we've
so in 5 years, we've issued
23,749.
So about 4,000 some a year.
Right.
Okay, so we have about 4,000 violations a year. They're good usually for about 2 years. So we've got about 8,000 open violations in the city of Cleveland right now. Let's just use that as a ballpark. And we are not closing them all out with compliance. We're not coming close to closing all of them out with compliance. And we're going to add to that an extra 1,400 inspections a year, interior and exterior, with these 6 new staff members that we already know aren't going to be able to help us with the backlog. And I guess my concern here, Mr. Chair, is if we're allowed to transfer the violation to the new buyer, and we can go out and inspect those vacant properties right now, we don't even need to go inside. We can do the exterior inspection, cite them, transfer that violation to the buyer. What does the point of sale give us that we don't already have?
Through the chair to the councilman, so much more clarity into the condition of the nearly 10,000 vacant properties out there. We don't walk around the back of them. We're doing this inspection from the street. Right. This would allow us on the property to go around the entire property, to go inside the property and document the condition of the property.
Right. When we see fit.
For 1 to 3 family homes, before they transfer, always. And when we see fit, if we see an issue. Okay. It allows us to request that inspection. That's what we don't have now. We would have to get a search warrant, and we may not get it.
So, Mr. Chairman, we've talked a lot about having this problem of walking before we run. I think it's more of a problem of jogging before we sprint. And I know that we are not keeping up with our current violations. I know that we do not see violations through to compliance. That does not happen in the status quo. And we know that we're short-staffed. And I would remind everybody, Mr. Chairman, the administration sent us a building and housing budget last year that we decided to increase. City Council looked at the mayor's estimate and said, that's not enough for this department. And we added millions of dollars to the Department of Building and Housing so they could hire more inspectors. They haven't hired all those inspectors, but if we're going to make this work, we have to add millions more again this year. And if we've got 8,000 open violations, maybe we ought to figure out how to deal with the problems on hand before we create more work for these inspectors that we have not hired yet. This is my big concern. It's not whether or not in an ideal world point of sale is good or bad. It's what can we accomplish, what can we expect our staff and inspectors to accomplish, and are we being realistic with our expectations? And I would really love us to see closing out violations, holding the lead certifications up, actually transferring violations and holding people accountable. I would love to see us do those things, getting local agents on paper and actually starting to enforce that part of the code before we deal with this massive new set of problems that are on top of the ones we haven't dealt with. And I love building and housing. I think it's the most vital department in the city of Cleveland, but we're not there yet. And what is the point of coming back in 180 days to review whether or not we start when we could just come back in 180 days to review whether or not we're able to start? I don't understand the urgency of that section when there's so much other work to do. And I have one other question about the fire example, but was that my time?
Go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't you give us your fire example? We'll respond to your.
Well, the fire example, we kind of covered it because in the fire example in Councilman McCormick's ward, which was on page 17.
Make sure you run it through the chair.
Through the chair to the director, the out-of-state local agent in charge would be appointed is sans point of sale. That happens anyway. The inspector would issue civil tickets would happen without point of sale. Taking the owner or LAIC to court happens without point of sale. The property is required to be registered without point of sale. Buyer would have assumed violations without point of sale, and buyer would have been required to address without point of sale. That entire scenario has nothing to do with point of sale inspections. That's other excellent parts of this legislation. I'm a huge fan of whatever 365.02 and 367.12. Fantastic, great work. That happens because of this. This section, this example happens because of those, not because of point of sale. And I guess I'm asking through the chair, could the director respond to like, why is this
Right.
about vacant property inspections?
Through the
here?
chair to the councilman, that example in Tremont, if we had had the vacant building ordinance, yes, they would have had to register it and had a local agent in charge, but also we would have had to inspect the inside, and the buyer who took control of this derelict property would have had to assume those violations, knowing what all of them were, and would have had to make the repairs within 6
But
months.
through the chair, the fire department issues their own violations anyway. When they go after the fire, they go through, they do, what's it called, not forthwith, that's the wrong word, but the fire department does this anyway. I mean, it would have already been on paper because of the fire.
Through the chair to the councilman, we can always do things in a roundabout way, or we can do them in a direct way. So we're asking for the tools we need to take the shackles off our ankles so we can run. We believe we can. If we can't run in 2 years, you have the right to repeal this. Our request of this body is that you vote for this, give us the chance, let us show you what we can do, show you how it can improve neighborhoods the way that it improved mine that I enforced for 10 years. I realize it's a different market, but I think it worked, and I don't think anybody here would say it didn't. And it was ambitious at the time, and you could have criticized me at the time for not being on top of all the exterior violations in the city. But when we talk about where the Ds and Fs are, where are they? They're in the vacant properties. If we don't make a dent in those, we are not going to bring up values the way you want me to bring them up. We are going to be held accountable for the derelict conditions in the neighborhood without the tools that we need to correct it. So I'm asking for the tools. I'm being emphatic about it. I understand your reservations. I understand everyone's reservations, but it will work.
Through the chair to the director, I think we get the mayor's estimate in 2 days, but we don't even know if the administration is going to take the shackles off of you. We are not a properly staffed Department of Building and Housing to be able to handle this. We can't handle the work that we have. Now, if we come back and there's a mayor's estimate in 2 days that says they're going to put another $8 million into building and housing, then maybe I'll start to believe that we can actually do this.
Through the chair to the
We
council.
might have to have that fight, though, on this side of the table again. I apologize,
I'm
Director,
sorry.
for interrupting.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
We actually have
Bear in
great
mind.
admiration for you.
I believe you do. We've worked together a long time, and I value you so much. The proposal in front of you would be self-sustaining in many ways. So the requirement to register vacant buildings. So imagine they all register at $70 a piece. We need a unit probably with 5 inspectors. We just passed our local 100 union contract, okay? We haven't had that. We are starting to see offers out there. You know, we have 5 to 7 people we'll be hiring soon. We know we need to backfill the positions that are open. We know we need maybe 15 more to do this. We feel confident in that. So I think it's doable, and I believe that if you spoke to the mayor, he would say he absolutely wants this to work. He will give us the resources we need for this to work. I don't have a fear about that. I really don't. And furthermore, I think this is going to pay for itself. Right? We're going to cover our costs. We will be made whole.
Mr. Chair, through the director, I would love nothing more than to see a building and housing department that is financed at the level of revenue it generates. That would, a cost-neutral B&H would be a beautiful thing to see, and we've never had it, at least as far as I've lived in Cleveland. I don't think we've ever seen a Department of Building and Housing that actually got the funding that it recuperated on an annual basis. The 180 days, Mr. Chair, is a request that we take care of staffing. We pass a budget that actually includes the increases they need, and they cannot do this successfully without. We don't know what the mayor's estimate is yet. But if we have all that in line, there is no difference between waiting 100 days to say, are we ready to go, and saying, let's decide if we want to start in 180 days. It's all written. The legislation's all here. We just come back in 180 days to decide if this is something we're ready to endeavor. And I think that it is foolish for us to put this much work on the department that we have now in hopes that we get the department we want, when this body has never seen us hire the people that we know the department needs. And it's not a criticism or a slight. It's just the reality of the city we're living in. I think that we're put too much on our plate. There's a chance we don't get to any of it. And there's so much good here, right? There's 90% of this, I think, ready to fly out the door, great. But I think that you put too much on the plate, and all of a sudden you're not eating any of it. Director?
Through the chair to the councilman, we've had a long time to think about this. We've been working on this for almost a year. Call me an overachiever, but I think this is what's needed. We feel, our department feels we can do it. We've put a lot of thought into what resources we need, what the impacts are going to be onto our department. So this isn't something we haven't started thinking about. We want the 180 days so that we can staff it up appropriately, that we can get all of our IT stuff together.
Come back in 180 days.
Do you really want to come back in?
It's a fair question. The whole section is written. The whole section is written. 3106.06. 3106.06. The whole thing is written. You bring it back in 180 days. You say, are we ready to do this section, yes or no? And we decide yes or no.
Through the chair of the council person.
Much easier question.
I appreciate that perspective. I will add that 180 days is July. There's a July recess then. We wouldn't be heard until after Labor Day. That may take a couple additional DPS hearings. So we're looking at October maybe, but it's an election year, which has me concerned about our ability to do the big things in October. Here we are, ready to go. In front of you.
I would actually
Very
say
excited.
So thank you for that, Austin. If there's a need to call a meeting during the summer, I have the ability to call that meeting. If we need to call that meeting. And also, council does have meetings, council meetings, finance meetings during the summer as well. So for the people who are viewing, don't believe that we are just sitting at home somewhere twiddling our thumbs during the months of July and August, but we do meet during those summer months as well. And we can meet more frequently as needed.
To the chair, I apologize. Didn't mean to impugn the integrity. It's more pointing out you're busy.
I get you. I got you. All right.
And I would actually add to that, Mr. Chair, it would be 180 days from April 1st, because that's when the new budget kicks in for hiring. That's when you can start hiring off the new budget. So that would be August.
Anything further, Director? Any more
October.
thoughts? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, who do we have all on the list right now?
You're coming up next. Mrs. Allen?
I just wanted to say real quick, working in records administration with records administration, rental registration, the vacant property registry is definitely something that the city of Cleveland is going to needs, because if we lose those owners, the vacant property owners, they're slipping under the radar, and we'll never have a way of capturing them. So regardless of how we look at this or do it, we definitely need the vacant property registry, because I get tons of customers coming into the office every day saying my property is vacant.
Yes.
So therefore, we have to exempt them, and then they under the radar, and you never have any way of finding them.
Mr. Chair, I totally agree with the director. I am 100% in favor of the vacant property registry. We need to stop giving people an excuse. Either you live in your house or you're registering as a rental or a vacancy. Those are your options in life. I totally agree. Yes, 100%. And having the vacant registry The vacant registry section in the legislation makes it even easier to insert the point of sale provision later on.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Joe Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I've been sitting at this table talking about code enforcement. That's the reason why I feel some kind of way. And if I offended some folks with my comments earlier, I didn't mean to, but the frustration of our citizens have reached a certain level of a breaking point. And we've seen from one administration to the next administration a just absolutely complete failure, with the exception of probably, I think the code enforcement department back in the 90s was a lot more effective, even though it had its challenges at that particular period in time. But when we look at Ariana Donald, Ron O'Leary, Ed Ripka, Jimmy Williams, going all the way back from one administration to the next administration, none of these people had backgrounds in building and housing. And it's one of the things that, you know, frustrates me as an elected official sitting here at the table, to see that people are put in positions who are responsible for running million-dollar and multi-million-dollar departments, and they don't have the background. They don't have the training. They don't have any certificates. They don't know, and we're talking about building and housing right now, and they don't have the wherewithal to really understand, get a handle over, and run this department as this department should be used and run in a way to protect our housing stock. And one of the issues in the 1990s were, how do we improve Cleveland's housing stock? How do we build new homes? And how do we begin the proposition of building a product that the citizens of the city of Cleveland can stay in their homes, work, play, and live, not just in one section, as you may have heard my statement earlier about politically choosing winners and losing communities. And what we have seen is the political proposition from one decade into the next decade out. And over 23 years, we've had people who have set in where the director, and this is me talking about this director. She has the background. She's the only one that has come to this table since 1997 that has a background in building and housing. We have a department that's out of control. It's been spiraling out of control from one elected mayor to the next elected mayor. And so, you know, I'm here, Mr. Chairman, to give this director the tools that she needs to have to run this department. I'm not going to be sitting here wrangling with her about what she says she wants and she needs to have. I want to be able to give her what she needs, put her on the street, and say, go for it. But here's the thing that I have, Mr. Chairman, and this is a problem because, and this is the reason why the department's so messed up. I've said here, and we've said in the caucus, and Jay Westbrook, God bless his soul, he was here earlier. We would sit back in the back and we would talk, Mr. Chairman, I share this with you, where some council people, and I'm not going to say their names because some of them, you know, and I will say Fannie Lewis. I won't say the other person's name because I don't want people to think I'm biased against him. But I saw both of them wrangle at the table about they didn't want inspections in their neighborhoods. And I at the time said, well, Mr. Chairman, we want all the inspectors we can get in Ward 1 because Ward 1 is about trying to keep their housing stock up. And that's the most important thing that we should be talking about here at this table. How do we keep our existing housing stock? Now, the director showed us some photos. Showed us photos of homes that are dilapidated, falling down. And here's, it just hurts my soul and spirit as a citizen in this city, as a homeowner, as a father to a son, and a father to a daughter, and a husband to a wife, to have to live in an environment that's depressing. And then we have all these people who work for us. And, you know, to see the numbers that we see, Mr. Chairman, to the director, what it basically really boils down to, and what I've asked the questions about when you came with that 100 inspectors and everybody is doing everything, that's a way to hide and not do work. We need to really have a fundamental breakdown of your department on who's doing what. We really need to know who's doing what in your department. For me to sit here at this table, Mr. Chairman, and complain about these issues and to bring these situations to your table and not get any results on them, guess what happens? And I'm going to use a term that Kevin Conwell constantly says. They're not going to be upset and angry at you, Mr. Chairman, to the director or to the mayor. They brought that situation to the council person. So guess what? That property, 16812 on Fairfax Avenue, if I done brought that issue to your attention once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, showed you the violation, showed you how bad it is, you mean to tell me, Mr. Chairman, now I don't give you, Mr. Chairman, to the director a whole list of housing. But when I do give you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vanover, if you don't mind, if I can see the chairwoman's, I want to see her face when I'm talking to her. When I give you a property, I mean for it to get taken care of. I don't mean to keep calling you over and over and over again. I get 75 phone calls a day. And when those citizens give me a call, Mr. Chairman, I'm out at those properties. I don't know what our inspectors do, but I know I'm at that property. Why? Because I don't know when those inspectors are going to go there. So when Missy Lester Walker gives me a call and says, we got all this debris on the property, guess what? I'm right there. Why? Because she's been living in the neighborhood for 60 years. And I found, Mr. Chairman, that our senior citizens are our assets. They are our biggest investors in our community. Why? Because they maintain their properties. And we want to be able to keep our senior citizens in their homes. And if I could, Mr. Chairman, give them to live to 120 or 130 or 140 years, I would. Because they are our strength and our asset. So when she calls me, Mr. Chairman, and tells me 16812 is horrible, and I come to you and I ask you to deal with that issue, it's 2 years riding now. And it doesn't seem like there's been no changes. The siding is off the property. And Mr. Chairman, here's where it really hurts to my soul and spirit as an elected official. And this is people who work in your department for 30 years, some of your senior people. I complained about a property, and it still burns me up, on 156th Street. And I turned the issue in. We have a property that's next to it. Homeowners have been living there for 50 years. The property turned into an LLC property, causing all sorts of problems for the neighbors. They're not keeping their property up. They're smoking marijuana. They can smell the stuff next door to them. It's having an impact on them. Loud music, so on, etc. Now, that's not your department. Now, we've turned it into the police department. But then the house starts to falling apart. Gutters falling down, shingles missing on top of it, garage is peeling paint all over the place. I turn the issue in to your top lieutenant, and I'll tell you who he is later. And then I say, well, they're on it, Sister Lester Walker, and they're going to take care of it. Don't worry about it. You know, we're going to do that. And this was previous administration. Your person is still there now. And then I get a second call 6 months later about it, that it's gotten worse and nothing has happened. They haven't fixed the property. And then I go straight to the property and I take some more photos just to double check. Returning it back into the property again, just like Fairfax Avenue. Nothing happens. A year later, I'm at the property, Mr. Chairman, because we're talking about these rules, because this is important to the line of questioning that came from Chris Harsh in terms of accountability and workload and personnel. Turn that issue in again, and then this time I get the person on the phone, your person, who's been working for your department. Now I'm probably be about 35 years he's been there. And then I get him dead smack on the phone. I'm complaining about the address. He's got an attitude, because some of your people got an attitude. You can look at them, their body language, everything about them. They got an attitude like they don't even want to be here sitting at the table. And so at the end of the day, when I tell you that I've had it with attitudes, I work for the citizens. I got to be humble. I got to go out there and take stuff I don't want to take. And I'm taking it for your department who's not doing their job. And so when I go down there and I'm dealing with my citizens, they beat the hell out of me. They call me and beat the hell out of me. They text me and beat the hell out of me. They give me emails and beat the hell out of me. So then when I'm dealing with an issue I've turned into your department 4 times, this issue, 4 times. And I get your main inspector who did the inspections, happen to catch him on the phone. Just by happen chance. It was all God. That's what I'm going to say. It's all God. Then he says, well, what's the problem? Got an attitude. So I said, listen, sir, I'm turning this property in. I've had this issue several times. I'm just trying to figure out where it's at in the process. And so then he says, well, what's the address? Give it to me. Just like that, just like I'm telling you, just right now. And so I gave him the address, gave him the street number, was cool, calm, and collected about it, even though I'm sensing all kinds of attitude. And so then I say, he says, well, what's wrong with the property? I was the one that was out there. So now he done told on himself. And I said, well, for starters, you got shingles missing. And he's looking at, well, we ain't got no shingles. I said, I already sent you the photos. Why don't you check your piece? I sent them over. You got front steps where the bricks are out of place. So you got gutters, and he said, well, can you see this from the street? I said, yes, you can see it from the street. And this is going to add into my next line of questioning. And then there's gutters, there's shingles, and then there's the front steps are all out of order. You can actually see it from the street, Director, Mr. Chairman, to the Director. And then the garage, you can see it from the street. Paint is peeled where it's actually laying in the driveway. You can see the paint. So I tell him the paint is peeling. And after I tell him all those things, he kind of like get cool a little bit. And I said, so what are you going to do about it? I've already turned this issue in. And Mr. Chairman, I submit to you today to the Director. If I go by that house today, I can guarantee you it's in the same condition. So why is it that we got people who are working for the city of Cleveland for 35 years and they can't do their job? And Mr. Chairman, to the Director, I run my business. If those contractors don't take care of those asset companies and our clients that we need to take care of, guess how long they're going to stay with us? Not long. They're going to get a warning, and they're going to get a second warning, and then they're going to be fired. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't know what kind of contract we worked out. I've heard the Director talk about it, but I want to go into how do you handle employees who don't do their work. This is 35 years of nothingness. And I guarantee you, Mr. Chairman, if I go right there to that property right now and take photos, and it's the same, and I believe it is still the same, how do we handle that issue?
Thank you, Councilman.
I'm not finished.
I
I
know
want to ask the question, how do we handle the issue?
Thank you, Councilman. And so you've hit your time, but I'm going to allow the Director to make sure you answer your question and add another 3 minutes on for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You got it. Director.
Through the chair to the councilman, offline, I'll definitely talk to you about the individual you're speaking about, because obviously we're not going to discuss a personnel matter at the table. I wouldn't do that to my staff. I will say, again, if we do the same thing over and over again, and we expect a different result than we've been getting, that's the definition of insanity. The tools we have don't work. We need different tools, and that's why we're here today, to get the tools we need. I will address your concern about a specific staff member not here, but certainly that's a concern to me, what you've said. I take that very seriously. I believe most of our staff are very devoted to Cleveland. Most of them live here. They care about neighborhoods. They work very hard. They work so hard that it's extremely frustrating to them when they don't drive results. It's frustrating. It's hard to work hard, never drive results. So I'm here to serve the people. I'm here to support housing values. I'm here to enforce the building code on the built environment in our city. So we've worked very long. We've collaborated with many to create a package of legislation we think is going to help us work smarter and achieve results that we haven't seen here in a generation, and it's past time. So I am grateful, Councilman, for your support, because I believe you do support what we're proposing, and I'm grateful. As always, I'm committed to working with you to solve the issues in your ward. in a meaningful way. And I believe the tools we're proposing could get us there.
Well, Mr. Chairman, to the director, thank you. You know, I opened up my comments stating that I wanted to give you the tools that you need to have, and I talked about the history of not having a competent, capable person being sitting in the seat where you're sitting now. So I'm appreciative of what you're talking about. But this council member is speaking on behalf of 25,800 people who have not seen a building and housing department be effective or efficient. And we haven't seen it on our commercial strips, as you may have heard the testimony earlier, and we're still not seeing it now. So it's been 23 years of nothingness. And so I need your assistance and, with helping me with Miles Avenue. Miles Avenue is a mess. Lee Road is a mess. Harvard is a mess. And so I need my main strips, and we talked about the main streets, to get done. And first I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me additional time. We need to get that done. I don't have no problem here supporting you, Director, when you first came in. I said, good luck. You got a hard job. And so I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, that you said that you have a lot of your people that since you've been in there for the last 2 years, who are doing a lot of hard work. And I'm just going to take your professionalism on it. I have a new, fresh look at it. But part of that new, fresh look means being able to get something done. And so I really would like to sit down with you and really talk about Ward 1, the Lee Harvard area. Many of our citizens who have been homeowners for years, 50, 60 years, when some neighborhoods like the downtown area didn't have the kind of populations they had, those people paid their taxes. They were here. They worked hard, but they haven't gotten the same kind of investments coming into their communities like they should. And part of that, and which is and has been a part of the fabric of that neighborhood, Mr. Chairman, is code enforcement. So we need to do a better job. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you to try to see what code inspectors that we need to have in our neighborhood who are assigned to our community. Or if they're not assigned, I need to get some assignments to our neighborhood. I need to see something, Mr. Chairman, because right now I'm looking at the last 2 to 23 years of nothingness. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Joe Jones. I'm going to go to Councilwoman Spencer and then back to Councilman Kerry McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to actually address a comment to our chair, which is thank you for all your work in many conversations to get us to this point. I know we had a couple slides today with amendments to this piece. For the viewing public, those 2 simple slides represent a lot of work, a lot of collaboration, a lot of dialogue. And I, as a committee member, am grateful that a lot of those finer points were hammered out. Our chair did reach out and discuss those. And so I think that we are in a very good place with this legislation today. And I really appreciate the unseen work that now, once you're on this side of the table, you finally see kind of what it takes to get to this point. So thank you all for the collaboration on that and for those amendments that were detailed today. I did want to really just reflect on, I think, as I'm hearing just some of the questions and pulling out a common theme, this is an ambitious piece. This is very ambitious. There is a lot to it, and I think, for lack of a better word, maybe not a very sophisticated word, but there's a little indigestion about the staffing, right? About the scale up and the staffing that this will require. I am at this point wanting to give the legislative authority to let the department proceed and then check in as has been proposed. That said, I think my question through the chair is, when we come to table for budget, how can we have that detailed understanding of here's how this budget corresponds to this plan? Because that won't be evident. The mayor's estimate itself, that's not, we'd have to parse that, or there's not, the mayor's estimate is not by itself a, it's one way to look at this, but it's not the actual staffing plan. So is there a way to as a follow-up to today's discussion, have that understanding of the staffing plan and clearly see the correlation between the budget the administration is proposing and how it corresponds to the staffing plan through the chair? I hope that question makes sense.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I believe so. Having spoken to Chief Abinama and certainly the mayor about this, there's a feeling that they absolutely want this to work and be staffed appropriately. Of course, the mayor's estimate is probably not going to increase by 15 head count because you haven't passed this, right? So it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So I think my understanding, after having numerous conversations, is they absolutely are supporting it. And I believe you understand that where Chief Abinama is going with the staffing is that he's pooling vacant positions. You can pull from them, which is a good strategy. So I will speak to him about what he can do to allay these fears and to sort of lay it out on paper. So I'll make that request, and I'm certain they will comply with that.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up to that, I think I'm looking at our chair because I would, want to make sure I remember from prior budget, we call them green sheets, the insertions that go into the budget.
Yeah, the green sheets,
I mean,
yeah.
this is, I think, a really good example
Green sheet.
of a green sheet. This is where we would want to ensure that the resources are behind. I understand the timing is not ideal. We're looking at this piece now. Mayor's estimate's coming out in a couple days. But I think when we're at the table, having that green sheet and being able to clearly say, here's how we're going to staff this up, I think will be very important as we have, then at that point give comfort to approving that budget. So I hope that feedback is helpful, and I'll follow up as needed if during the budgetary process as well. I think a lot of my questions were addressed through my colleagues' questions. I wanted to a couple small pieces of clarification. One is on the question of our point of sale inspections that have been talked about a great deal. Do we need to re-inspect properties that are already condemned? Because to me, if something is condemned, that already kind of screams buyer beware, right? If something's condemned, it's kind of worst of the worst. It's hit rock bottom. If something's condemned, it's hit rock bottom. So I'm just thinking about, again, the staffing capacity need and ramping up. And so if something is already condemned, would we need to re-inspect through point of sale? Through the chair.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I think it depends on how old the condemnation is. If it was recent, we'd gotten a search warrant, we did inspect the interior as we do with condemnations, that would stand. If it's been 10 years and it's been sitting there condemned, I think we'd want to get inside and do another inspection. The conditions change dramatically, even in a few months, especially if exposed to weather. So, but even so, the amount that transfer in a given year, I think, is a very doable number for us. We've put a lot of thought into that, and we believe we can achieve it.
Thank you. Can you clarify your last statement through the chair, director, that you just said?
Yes, through the chair to the councilwoman, we believe if we look at an average of how many vacant 1 to 3 families transfer in a given year, we're somewhere between 1,200 and 1,400, which you feel is a very doable number.
All right, thank you. And then one more kind of technical question here. Can through the chair to our administration, the certificate of disclosure piece, how is that changing with this legislation through the chair? Or what are the updates or changes regarding certificate of disclosure?
Through the chair to the councilwoman, I'll call on Tony to elaborate further if this is needed. But essentially, we have 2 processes. So if it's 4 more units, it's a statement of authorized use, which isn't super enforceable. We don't prosecute people for failing to get a statement of authorized use. It's not. Please elaborate, Tony, because I know this is a passion for you, and we've talked extensively about it. It merges the whole process into one, okay, which discloses way more information to a buyer.
To the chair, to the councilwoman, currently the statement of the certificate of disclosure is mandatory for 1 to 4 dwelling units. The statement of authorized and the certificate of disclosure currently disclose the condition of the violation and condemnation history on the property. It discloses if there is a lead control order on the property, any type of violations, active violations within the last 2 years. However, we also are including any open violations, regardless if they are within that 2-year parameter. The state, and that's for 1 to 4 dwelling unit. The certificate, the statement of authorized use letter is for 5 residential dwelling units above and commercial property, meaning like it's an auto store, bakery, storefront, church, etc. That is not mandatory. However, the bank many times require the buyer to get the statement of authorized use letter. The code violation letter for commercial properties 5 and above, and then other commercial properties is mandatory as well. So when you get a statement of authorized use letter, you're not getting full disclosure of that property. What we're proposing is if we can combine the statement of authorized use letter with the certificate of disclosure, and the certificate of disclosure will be required for all properties within the city of Cleveland. That way, the potential buyer will have disclosure on what's going on with that property, whether it's a commercial or a residential. If it's vacant, we just revamped the certificate of disclosure application to add more questions, to get more information for the property as far as the statutory agent, who's the statutory agent, if this property is going to be used for rental property. Does this property have a current lead safe certification? So what we have done, we have expanded the questions on the certificate of disclosure. And now by combining the statement or requiring it for all properties, everything that we have in our files will be disclosed to the potential buyer.
Thank you for that wonderful, that's a great cheat sheet definition. That's great, very helpful. I did want to, though, clarify earlier, Councilman Harsh had referenced sheriff's sale properties. There's no current, to clarify through the chair, there's no current certificate of disclosure for sheriff's sale properties. Would that, that's my understanding, would that change with this legislation?
To the chair, to the council. And that's a very good question. That's something that we have been looking at. As of now, sheriff sales, no, a certificate of disclosure is not required for sheriff sales. However, when the purchaser purchased the property at the sheriff's sale, and then if they decide they want to sell the property, then that individual will have to obtain a certificate of disclosure. We have been trying to figure out how can we include that, because of course we'll have to work with the county and the state as well, because properties are sold through the state sales as well. And the whole purpose is to disclose the condition before they purchase the property.
Right.
So we'll have to have the cooperation of the county, because they'll have to submit the disclosures before the property go to the sheriff's sale. And I think that's about once a year. However, they're not going to have the buyer, because you're not going to know who the buyer are. And then depending on when they submit the certificate of disclosure application, the property could be condemned at that time, or could not be condemned. So if they submit the application today, but they don't have the sheriff's sale until 6 months later, and maybe at that time we condemn the property. So there's a lot of variables we have been considering how we would do that.
Great, a lot to consider there. I think I might be out of time and I need to get cut off here, but I had one more brief question, Mr. Chair. This is a kind of a personal story from my ward. I think a big part of this legislation is holding bad actors accountable, but also hopefully getting good actors involved, right? Giving them more comfort, giving them attracting or supporting good actors in acquiring these properties. I had really a very tough email from a resident who he and his family purchased was a vacant property, and they are kind of lovingly restoring it little by little by little, but just access to capital, right, to do that. And I was just curious, this is not within the confines of the legislation, it's just because we're all at the table together through the chair. When you have those good actors, so we're trying to really, again, support good actors from getting involved. Through the chair, do any of us know about for that owner-occupant type, the person wanting to rehab a vacant property, what resources are out there? And if we don't know of any, that's okay. I'm just curious because I think that's another really interesting part of this dilemma.
Through the chair to the councilwoman, as you know, there's about $50 million in ARPA money that's going for home repair. So in addition to that, though, I know, having talked recently to our new county treasurer, Brad Cromis, they're reworking the help loan, so that should be coming out again as a refreshed great tool, as is the Heritage Home Loan, a long-standing wonderful tool that also, I believe, that this city is investing in through ARPA as well to kind of expand access to the Heritage Home program. So resources are out there. We always need more, of course, we always need more, but I believe we're also trying to leverage as much as we can with our local financial institutions. So I think there's some really bright spots on the horizon for Cleveland residents who need to make home repairs.
Thanks. Thank you for responding to that. And with that, I conclude, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the time.
All right, thank you. We're going to go to Councilman McCormick. Then after Councilman McCormick, we're going to take any final questions and comments. We have to be out of here in 15 minutes. We have another committee starting at 1:30.
Thank you, Chair. I promise you I will not hit my 10-minute mark. I'll be very brief. Number one, I want to reflect the comments of thanking you, Mr. Chairman, for this robust conversation. This is a big policy change, so I really appreciate that there is this robust conversation happening. Chair, I'm just reflecting on the conversation at the table, and I actually think that the point of sale would have helped in Tremont. We're 4 years in. It's been transferred 3 times, and I think a point of sale that would have gone along with these other tools could have really helped, now that I'm thinking this through. Chair, my last comment is going to be that I am fully supportive of voting for this legislation as is. I think that Sally Martin came to the city specifically to think critically about the systems in which we are deploying to address these issues. I do not believe, based on her track record outside of the city, her track record at the city, and her testimony over and over again, that she is here to do things the same way, and that she's interested in changing systems to better deploy resources and to have more of an impact in the city of Cleveland. I fundamentally believe that. You've got a great team in front of you, too, but I believe that you came here to shake things up. I don't believe you came here for an easy job. I don't think you came here to retire, to complete your retirement years. I don't think you did any of that. Like, you could have done that in a much easier position somewhere else. I fundamentally believe that you came here to change systems because, as Councilman Jones and others have noted, the systems have not worked. In Tremont, the inspectors have been out there. They have been. Commissioner Vanover has been engaged. The person hasn't shown up in court, I don't know how many times. It's been transferred. The problem in Tremont has not been that B&H has not been there. That has not been my issue on that property. It's been the other parts of the system that have not worked. So, I mean, I guess I'm just saying that I understand the rightful concerns around staffing and all of that, but the problem in the city of Cleveland, I'm a lifelong city resident. I will die in the city of Cleveland. I was born and raised in Ward 8, a proud resident of Ward 3. I will be here until my last breath, not at this table, but I will be in the city, a city resident, until my last breath. I care, and one of the challenges that I've seen is we haven't taken enough risk. We've been so afraid to fail as a system that we haven't taken enough risk to do things differently. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to fully support voting for this legislation as is. I understand that there is risk, but the biggest problem in these systems is we haven't taken enough risk, we haven't changed things, we haven't taken a big enough leap, and we have all suffered because we have not taken enough of a risk. And so, again, Mr. Chairman, I want to reflect that the concerns I believe are valid of my colleagues, but I, number one, believe in this director. We haven't seen this type of policy change out of this department in my time here. And that's not to say there aren't good people doing good things, and just to say that I'm here to support this legislation. I trust in this director to take a chance, and I think we are beyond time to take a risk and to take a chance to change these systems. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I got two folks asking for, on that point, Councilman Harsh briefly, and then Councilwoman Spencer briefly. We're going to move on. Thank you.
Through the chair to the director, can the city legally stop the transfer of a property?
Through the chair to the councilman, no.
Correct. Through the chair to my colleagues, the property can transfer so long as the buyer wants to sell the property, as long as the owner wants to sell the property and they have a buyer. It's your bundle of rights. You have the right to sell your property. No state can stop you. The city cannot stop you from selling. But what's really important in this legislation is that we are allowing violations to transfer from seller to buyer. And that violation on that burnt out house is now going to be the new owner's responsibility. That has nothing to do with the point of sale. I think that's really important for us to distinguish. We're doing great things here.
I would disagree. I think an inspection of that property at a point of sale would provide additional facts and information. I just fundamentally disagree.
And I can understand the disagreement, but it still travels the violation because the fire department's going to issue it. And the fire department's going to issue the violation on a burnout. They absolutely have to. Then that's the fire department's problem.
Make sure that we stay within the
Sorry,
rules.
but through the chair, or to the chair, it's just important for us to note that we cannot legally stop the transfer of properties.
Thanks, Councilman. Councilman Spencer.
I wanted to respond on a different point of Councilman McCormick's
go ahead.
comments, which is that oftentimes appreciation is in short supply here, and I wanted to echo Councilman McCormick's appreciation for the director's work and all involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, listen, we've made it through our second Tuesday.
I want to propose an amendment.
4 hours, right? And so, very good discussion. Thank you. Yeah, she didn't bring our butter pound cake today, but that's okay.
Didn't expect it to be full.
And just have it show up tomorrow. All right, but no, seriously, thank you. Thank you to all of those who provided input along the way. Thank you to our friends from ACAR who came today, who has worked with each and every one of us to, make this ordinance better. Again, not everyone is going to get what they want. It's about compromise. Thank you to Mr. Ford, who has provided some very detailed information to us, not only during this process, but, along the way. So we thank you for that as well. Thank you to members of this body who took the time to go and review and help and draft and push and pull and be a proactive part of this process. In fact, some of the aspects of this ordinance were ideas of members of this body.
Yes.
And so that is something that we should make sure that we note that, this was collaboration, I think, at its best, right? Even if it doesn't seem that way today, that is definitely collaboration on how we've gotten here to this point. And so, as the director indicated, these recommendations and the decisions were not made in the vacuum, but there really were multiple conversations across multiple sections, across multiple entities. Many hours went into this. And so, not everything is going to be perfect, right? The beauty about ordinances is that they can always be changed at any point, right? And the director mentioned one thing earlier. During our conversations, we came up with the recommendation to put a sunset on this. So that way, without further authorization, that this ordinance does not continue after 2 years, and that allows and ensures that there's a follow-up discussion as relates to the progress and the impact that this ordinance has had on our community, whether bad or good. And so I think that is only right. And so I thank you, Director, and your team for being amenable to that. I see Councilman Joe Jones' hand. He wants a brief point before we move on, because we have to get to the committee. Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I just, you give recognition and credit where it's due, and sometimes folks don't do that. I only have the day. I'm thankful for today, and I'm blessed if God allows me the opportunity to have tomorrow, Mr. Chairman. But I really appreciate the work that you do as the chairman of this committee, how you are thoughtful, how you deliberate the business, not just this particular piece of legislation, but very considerate of the members of the committee and the body. And I'm appreciative, as a council member sitting at this end of the table, you being the chairman of this committee, and I just appreciate the work that you do. I would say, Mr. Chairman, to the director, that a lot of discussion has went into this. I know that this just didn't pop up out of nowhere, that this process started almost a year and a half, 2 years ago, when you first stepped in the door and started taking an assessment of the issues and problems that are impacting the city of Cleveland and our housing stock. What I will share with you, which is very important to this body, is to do some of the things that Alyssa Hernandez has done, and that is to take a total evaluation of your department. And Mr. Chairman would ask that, that the director comes back, gives us an organizational chart, look at ways and means to changing the department. We can't keep the department the way it is. I know that God has given you this day, and hopefully we'll have a number of tomorrows together. But in doing that, we need to make sure that we have a system that can be held accountable. Mr. Chairman, I don't know who's who, so it would be great to know who those new people are, who are responsible for code enforcement in the city as a whole, and in particular, the Lee Harbor Ward 1, which I represent. So, Mr. Chairman, I look for our committee to really thoroughly engage in that process. And as Mr. Chairman, we know that the finance hearings are coming up. If the director can begin the proposition of preparing what she does have currently right now as relates to her department, it would be appreciative. It's long overdue. I can't even imagine a time when we've ever done it in your department in 23 years. So Mr. Chairman, it is something that's certainly long overdue.
Thank you, Councilman. Before we move to the amendments that we've seen today on our slide, with a few additional amendments, Councilman Harsh would like 1 minute.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have a concern about the section 3106.10, which would make all of 3106 ineffective following 2 years. I believe that would invalidate the entire vacancy registry, and that wasn't the intent. I think we're only looking to sunset the point of sale, and the rest of it would remain intact regardless.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
To the chair to the councilperson, it's to your discretion. I think it's worth reevaluating the entire registry if we're reevaluating this key element of it, but it's your piece.
Director.
Through the chair to the councilman, I agree with you, Councilman Harsh. I think the part that I think people are confused about or have some lingering concerns would be the point of sale. So having that sunset. I think pretty much we have consensus here about the vacant registry being a good tool to have, and we would love to see that continue. But I can see reassessing the point of sale aspect within 2 years.
All right, I'm fine with that. Mr. Davis, so we need to, what part of the, from the law department who's here?
31.06, 3106.06 would be sunset.
Okay.
Right.
That would just be the point of sale. The rest of the vacancy registry would be fine.
3106 point? Okay. So we'll just add, hold on 1 second. So we will, Mr. Davis, we can just add in that second language, that second line of the new section, just add .06.
That's right.
After that, and that'll give us what we,
Yes.
what we're looking for.
This chapter 3106.06 shall expire 2 years.
Correct.
Yep.
That said, I would like to proffer an amendment to strike section 3106.06.
So thank you, Councilman Harsh. Again, this is for the inspection. Correct. And so this is Councilman Harsh has made an amendment to strike that a motion to amend to strike that in section. Does he have a second?
Just strike those.
Too late, said it.
So Councilwoman thank you, Councilman Harsh. Councilwoman Spencer has inadvertently made the second. She quickly withdrew her second. Is there a second? All right, seeing no second. Okay, so we do have a second. All right, and so we do have a second from Councilwoman House. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please. No.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I support the director. No.
No.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The amendment does not carry.
But before we go, I have a question.
Yes.
Because I guess the point is, versus, I know we have this point in here, if the point of sale is not working, it will just expire after 2 years, that which is a part of the amendment. What part of it will we have an evaluation or something to see? You know what I'm saying? Why would you have, I just don't.
That's the point of it, for them to come back, and we're going to have a review of this in 2 years. That's coming back, and that also is stated in the original amendments as well.
I hear what y'all. I get that. I don't. Are we doing?
I got
Can
you.
I at least put a no on that point? I don't think we should have an expiration on that. I don't know how you are. Is this all together? A separate amendment? How are we reading this?
It's only on that particular section, 3106.06.
Yeah, I understand that. I just think we should have an evaluation versus sunsetting or expiration. That's just my point on that one. But
So, to your point, there will be an evaluation. That is the whole purpose of sunsetting for it to come back. And that ensures that it comes back to us for further review. So that is also in the initial amendments for the review after 2 years. And it also, with the sunset clause, further cements that requires the department to come back. I'm very certain the department will want to continue this work, right? And so that will allow us to dig deeper into this work after a few years.
okay.
All right. Councilman McCormick?
I was just going to, you said it perfectly. I mean, obviously, this committee has the right to call the director on this legislation at any point. A sunset provision, it ensures that no one forgets that is something, I mean, so that the director, because 2 years from now, people may not remember that. It just ensures that the director has to come back to the table.
Right.
It's more teeth than just saying we're going to pull the director back to review it. Right. It's essentially what a sunset helps with.
Thank you. Agree with you, Councilman. All right. So, Councilman Harsh.
Yep. One more. Mr. Chair, I'm concerned about the section 3106.10 says chapter 3106 shall take effect 6 months following. We need the vacancy registry to start immediately because rental registry is starting now, and we need to be able to enforce the vacancy part of the registry, I believe, this month. I think the taking effect 6 months following passage only again applies to 3106.06.
Yep. We assumed that once we made that change for the authorization, that also means .06, because that is what you asking director for 6 months for it to take effect, right?
So law has that through the chair. 3106.10 now refers to 3106.06 in both clauses.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Director.
Through the chair to the councilman, we had originally said all of vacant building, the registry and the inspection should be deferred for 6 months, just to be able to scale up the IT for the registry. However, that being said, we're very close with Acela. As you all know, we've launched a whole Acela modernization program. You know, it's now on the cloud, and we were just building out a new rental app. I would imagine we could make it more immediate just for the registry. So I'm sitting here thinking that wasn't originally what we said, but I could make that work and would gladly make that work. And I think that our friend down the hall, down here,
But we're going to be done.
staff, she needs her staff, right? I mean, but originally, again, we're happy deferring that whole piece 180 days.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, make sure I'm right. So we, for just 106, we'll take effect after 6 months.
Well, yes, I think that's fine. Yes. We're agreeing to that here. Yeah, correct. Through the chair, the councilman is correct.
Got it. All right, thank you. All right, so going back, everyone has this handout, the two-page handout of the amendments. On your tablets, you also have the initial document that is 9 pages of amendments, right? I made that clear at our last committee meeting to please review those amendments. They're on your tablets then, they're on your tablets now. You have another 2-page amendment list here that is all of the technical aspects of what we've seen on the slide. The director kind of broke those down and went through those on our slide deck today. In addition to the 2 pages that we received today, there are 2 further requests to amend in the last bullet, in the last 2 lines of the last bullet on the 2-pager we received today. After this chapter, 3106, add .06. In the first line, second line, after this chapter, 3106, add .06, shall expire 2 years following the passage of this ordinance. I have asked our legal department whether, as the chair, I have the ability to make the amendments, and I was told, yes, I do have the legal ability to make those amendments, even as chair. Oftentimes, the chair does not like to do that, but today, with seeing these purposes and all that we've been through, I'm going to exercise that right. All right, and so I will not read all of the amendments in today because we have also been told if these are all circulated to the committee, then we are okay. All right, and so again, these are the technical aspects. Everyone has agreed that they have it through electronically and physical copies in their hand. We can make these available to the public if they would like a copy as well. All right. Seeing that been here too long. With that being said, the initial 9-page of amendments plus the additional 2 pages of amendments, I motion to approve. Second. We have a motion and second. Is there any discussion on the 11 pages of amendments? All right, it's motion second, no discussion. All in favor? Aye. All right, ayes have it. All opposed? Well, I'm sorry. All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk, the 11 pages of amendments has passed. Any further discussion from the committee? All right, so no further discussion from the committee. Ordinance number 1039-2023, as amended, stands approved. Thank you. All right. All right, listen again, thank you everyone. Truly, we appreciate your time, all of your effort, everyone's energy. You know, I think that this is a much better piece than where it started initially because of all the voices we've heard today, all the voices who may not be in the room but have been identified. And so again, we thank you and we look forward to our continued collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.